few seconds early or a few seconds late when the broadcast starts.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Come on, computers. I'm waiting for YouTube to pick it up. Wait, is that it? Yep. All right, cool. That setting's correct. Yay. Okay, now I'll close that so that I don't see in 3D for the whole night. Let's see. Cool. So we're waiting for other people to join. And I see we've got some mentors and mentees already in the room. I also am noticing an anonymous individual. I wish Slido made it easier for people to post less anonymously. But the anonymous question. The anonymous question is, will this webinar be available later today for review? Well, I appreciate it, Mr. Anonymous or Miss Anonymous, that you wish to review this. So the live stream will be available probably later today, but this will be all the live streams. I'll then be taking it offline for a short bit as I do all the clipping of all the different talks up into individual standalone talks. So hopefully I can get that done today. Probably take me longer than today to do all the video editing and get it back and post it online. But at some point they will be there again. Ooh, they changed the icons. Fun. All right. I see John is in the room officially. Rashid isn't officially in the room yet. Don't forget to do your sign in on the Q&A, Rashid. All right. That screen is good.
Do I need to sign anywhere on Q&A?
Yeah, read the email that I sent out. It tells you how to do the sign in.
Okay.
Let's see. Vikas, you director of strategy or any other kind of fancy additions to your title? Oh, he's muted. But I didn't see any.
No, that's nothing fancy. Just do a little bit of strategy. That's it.
All right. Well, we might have to do a fund to buy you a new laptop because that is some crazy hard drive sound that you've got there.
Okay. I promise it won't be there next time.
Yeah. All right. We've got what else we got going on? I'm starting to see some news from MIT that the ICBM missiles will not be able to reach California for at least a few years. That some people were fast and loose with some of the math. And it seems that it might have been direct from the president where that information was leaked. So, yay! We haven't seen that sort of stuff before. I don't know. I feel like I shouldn't get political, but man, what else is there? I was watching the OpenAI bot play Dota 2, which I've never played before. I've never played Dota before, but I did in my due diligence watching enough YouTube videos to figure out what Dota was. I'm looking at your faces to see if any of you are Dota players, and since none of you laughed, that means none of you are Dota players. But apparently they do these like world championships, and the OpenAI project, one of I think that's an Elon Musk company, just did a competition where they played against real players, and I don't think anyone was able to beat them. So it's and for those that don't know, if you know like StarCraft or Warcraft, like the real-time strategy type of stuff, not exactly that, but you kind of have like the players and stuff going at each other. I know this, if anyone plays Dota, they're so gonna correct me right now. Let's see, got that one. Cool beans. All right, we're gonna get going. Everyone's ready. Everyone looks all happy and cheerful in an uncheerful sort of way. I like that. All right, folks, give me 1 second. And thank you guys for everyone joining us right now. We're gonna get started. With the new format that we're doing, you get to see all the behind the scenes magic, or what I call magic. behind these. So you can see in the raw live streams right now, you'll see the prettier, cleaned up versions a little bit later. All right. And here we go. It's Sunday, August 13th, 2017. And today we're joined by one of our mentors, Vikas Batra. He's a director of strategy over at Nokia. And he's going to be leading a talk today on developing strategy for product managers. For those of you who are maybe joining us for the first time today, allow me to briefly explain the format. This is one of those things from the Product Mentor program that we like to open it up to the rest of the world. The people you see along the bottom of your screen are mentors and mentees within the current session of the Product Mentor. And each of our mentors in the Product Mentor program, where they get paired up with one mentee for the duration of about 6 months to help make better product people, better product decisions, and also, hey, better products at the same time. What each of the mentors does is they do a live talk in an area that they're particularly expert in. And because there's so many people that want to participate in the program, or it takes so long to get into the program, or you might just not qualify for this type of program, we still like to open up all this information to everybody, to as many people as possible. And so that's how you might also be joining us. You might be at theproductmentor.com/live joining us today for our live stream, and we'd like to just open it up. As you have questions, post them to that Slido channel. That Q&A section you see below the YouTube video on theproductmentor.com/live. As the questions come in, I'll pass them along to Vikas in a fairly real-time manner. I usually let him finish his thought before I jump in. So what I'd like to do very quickly is just kind of go around the room with some quick introductions. I'm going to start with the image that's directly to my left. And when you guys introduce yourself, what's your name? Are you a mentor or mentee? And anything else a little about yourself that you might want to add. So first, I'll just start with Vikas.
Thanks, Jeremy. My name is Vikas Batra, and I'm a mentor here. I've been doing this for quite some time. This is my 5th season doing it. I've enjoyed doing it. And my talk today will be about how product managers could develop strategy and thereby make more successful products.
Outstanding. And now we'll go to Rashid.
My name is Rashid Manzar, and I'm a mentee. I'm based out of Canada, and I'm working as a product manager at ADP.
Ooh, that's a good one to add. I always ask that. And also say where you are from when I come to you. And we'll go to Lee.
Hey guys, I'm a mentee from Melbourne. And I am session 7 of Product Mentor Group, and I'm a product manager for a company that develops SaaS products for hospitality industry.
Outstanding. And over to John. Hello, John. Oh no, his mic's not working. We'll just have to look deep into his eyes throughout this live stream. Thank you. Oh, he's blowing us kisses. This is wonderful. Let's see. And Shirzad, we'll have you quickly introduce yourself. Are you a mentor or a mentee, and where are you? And tell us a little bit about yourself. And then as soon as you do that, don't forget to mute yourself, and then we'll get started.
All right, so if you can hear me, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Sherzad. I'm based out of Berlin. I'm a product manager at Here Technologies, and I'm a mentee.
Outstanding. So we're going to get going. And also, I am Jeremy Horn, a.k.a. the product guy. I'll be moderating here today and hopefully feeding along all your awesome questions to Vikas. And all the other mentors will be joining us. So we've got a new mentor popping up every hour for the next 4 hours. We've got a lot of talks going on today. We will not be taking a break, or other people might be taking a break. I will not be taking a break today until we're done. So hopefully my legs don't fall asleep or I don't fall out of this chair. So thank you guys for joining us. But with all that said, let me hand it over to Vikas to take it away about developing strategy for product managers.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. So let's get started here. In many organizations, the product management function has a role on developing strategy. And that function of developing strategy becomes more critical as you go higher up within the product management organization. That function is critical for the success of the product, particularly if the product is a new product or if with an existing product you're trying to penetrate a new market. So my talk today, I will talk about what is strategy, how you could go about developing product strategy if that's part of your role, and how you could benefit from product strategy even if that's not part of your role, meaning defining it is not part of your role. And I would consider my talk successful if each one of you here today walks out after this call with at least one thing that you can go back and apply to your jobs. So let's get started with what is strategy. Essentially, if you look at strategy, strategy has two pieces to it. One is the aspiration. How do you define success? Where do you want to be? And the second piece of it is choosing what actions we do in order to realize that aspiration. It's all about choices, making the choices. It's distinctively different from execution, which involves implementing or executing those choices. And the one thing that I want to make everybody to get out of this is that you should not consider strategy to be more or less important than execution. They're both needed for successful product. So there are a lot of definitions of strategy. One of the definitions that I like is strategy as a fit. It's a fit between the external environment and your internal capabilities. Because you're trying to realize your aspiration within an environment that's external to you, and you generally do not have much control to change that. But you have your internal capabilities with which you're again trying to realize that aspiration that you have a greater control of, that you can adapt. So the idea here of a strategy as a fit is to see how you need to adapt, how you need to modify within the environment, which by the way will keep on evolving as well, such that you can realize your aspiration. So how do we go about making that fit? So you develop a strategy on that. And clearly, first of all, you have to define what your aspiration is. The other important piece of strategy is understanding that environment that you're in. How is that environment today? So you have to have really good awareness of that. How is it evolving over time? Like I said, it doesn't stay constant. It keeps on changing all the time. And how would it respond to your actions to realize your aspirations? You have to understand all of that. On the internal side, you have to understand what your capabilities are, which could be your strengths, weaknesses, not just what you have today, but what your potential is there. What strengths can you develop? What weaknesses can you overcome? And so on. Given those three, you then have to identify the options. Okay, so given what our aspiration is, given what the market is, given what our capabilities are, what can we do? What are the options on what we can do? Identify options. And this step may seem straightforward, but oftentimes it requires deep thinking to uncover options. Once you identify the options, then it's about analyzing it and making choices out of those options. So strategy is all about making choices on what to do and implicitly what not to do. And then depending on the role, you could either be making choices or you could be making recommendation and somebody else is making the choices. Now, strategy has various levels or context. You could have strategy at a country level. You could have strategy for a corporation, corporate strategy. You could have strategy for a given function within a corporation, for example, marketing strategy. You could have strategy for a product across all functions, product strategy, which is what we're going to talk about today. And you could even have the strategy at an individual level. At an individual level, you could have some aspirations that you can look at the environment you're in, look at the capabilities that you have, and identify options and choose options. So the key thing to note here also is that if you're in a large organization, you would have corporate strategy, you could have business groups that could have their own strategy, and your product would be sitting within that business group. So it kind of cascades down in large organizations. And one thing that as part of developing product strategy is to make sure that your product strategy is aligned with the business unit strategy or business group, and that business group strategy should in turn be aligned with the corporate strategy. So there's a cascading impact in large organizations. So this is a basic high-level background on what is strategy. Now let's get into product strategy, which is what we are here to talk about today. And to describe product strategy, there's a framework that I like. And the framework essentially says your product strategy should answer all these questions. We'll go through each of these questions one by one in no more than 4 or 5 pages. So there's a lot of information that generally goes into creating product strategy, but the idea here is to crystallize it, get the essence of it, and capture it in no more than 4 or 5 pages. So let's start with first question, which covers around what is the aspiration that we have. And that aspiration often ties to what difference the product is aspiring to make externally. Every product has to make a difference to somebody's life. And if your product is not making a difference to anybody's life, well, why is the product existing to begin with? So that has to be captured as to what that difference is. Is it taking away somebody's pain? Is it making something easier, faster, more enjoyable? Whatever that is, that has to be captured. You would also have, in addition to that, your internal objectives. Most of the products come from for-profit organizations, and there is a financial motive as well around making profit while making the difference. So there could be financial internal objectives, there could be other objectives around increasing market share, increasing number of users that are using, increasing the amount of time users spend on your product, and so on and so forth. If you are in a non-profit organization, you could have internal objectives around making an impact to the society. Whatever those may be, those have to get that captured in the strategy. Once you've captured that, the next question the strategy answers is, who are we making the difference to? Of all the people, businesses, organizations that are there in the world, whom do we choose to make the difference? And that covers geography, demography, customer segments, based on either income level, age group, so on and so forth. Then it should answer how will these selected set of people or organization, which we call as target audience, how will they even know that the product exists and can make the difference? Other question it has to answer is, how would the product get to the audience? If it's a physical product, this becomes critical. It should also answer that once it reaches your target audience, why will they select the product over other alternatives that may making the same difference? Once the target audience selects your product, will he or she be able to actually use the product? Will the difference that you are aspiring to make actually be made, even after the target audience decides to use the product? And in parallel, while you're doing all of that, how will the product meet the internal objectives? How do you measure and track whether the difference is being made and the internal objectives are being met? And what capabilities do we need internally within the organization to make it all happen? So basic set of questions, nothing too complicated about them. Those are the questions that the strategy or the product strategy has to answer. So how do we go about developing the answers to these questions? So that's the piece of developing product strategy. Now I'll step into it, and as I step into each one of these, I will also mention some of the jargon around it. There's a lot of jargon around it, which you may find scary at times, but at the end of it, it's all pretty simple trying to answer these questions. So let's look at each one of these one by one. So as you capture the aspiration, it has to be captured in a way that is pretty simple. A layman should be able to understand it. You have to also define it such that it's measurable and trackable. Make it time bound if you can. And it's okay to keep it over 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever the time interval will be. But clearly capture the difference that you're making to the person using it, which also gets captured as value proposition, and clearly capture the internal objectives that you're trying to meet. The next piece around who the target audience is called a segmentation. And this is a critical piece of your strategy, because here you're choosing first how you're segmenting, meaning you're taking the whole population of this planet and population of all the organizations as well, and you're segmenting them in the sense, okay, we will make a difference with people with certain attribute. What is that attribute upon which you're segmenting it? So that's one piece that you have to determine. Then you have to determine of the segments that you have, which one is really attractive. The segment attractiveness analysis can be critical in the success of a product. So how do you go about defining these customer segments? There are the traditional attributes that I've talked about: geography, age, income level, so on and so forth. But you don't have to use those attributes. You can define your own attributes, and that those attributes come from traits that your customers value, and then value so much, ideally, that you think that would make your product compelling enough to be used by them. So let me give an example here. How do we go about doing this? So I take an example from consumer goods industry around the soap Tide, or the detergent Tide. We all know Tide is the leading detergent used in washing clothes. And while that was going on, a competitor came, Gain, and they segmented the market based on a customer attribute of fragrance. What kind of fragrance is left in the clothes after the washing is done? And they created a segment on that of the people who care about fragrance, and created a product that targeted that segment. And even till today, and this was, I think, quite a few years ago, even till today, they control that segment. So there is no, in this case, there's no literature around it that would tell you that, okay, segment on this attribute. It's just an attribute that you have to pick from your customer base by realizing that, yes, they care about fragrance, and then create a segment and create a product that goes after that segment. As part of segment attractiveness, you also have to look at what is the competition in the segment that you're going after. And sometimes what happens is, if you could look at a large segment, you could look at competition in that segment and say, this segment is not attractive enough. But you have to look closely. You have to look closely within that large segment if you can find pockets of sub-segments, if you will, that are more attractive. You could also look at what technical innovations are happening that could make a certain segment, which was earlier unattractive, that the innovation makes it attractive. You also could look at if there is any kind of discontinuity happening in the marketplace that could open up a segment which was earlier considered unattractive. The key thing that I want to mention here also is that in terms of the segmentation has to be based on attributes that customers value. And it is your job to figure out what is it that the customers value. Just asking them what do you value will not give you the answers. It has to be figured out. So once you've figured out how you're segmenting it and which segment you're targeting, you now have to go to the next stage of how will the selected segment learn about your product. And that's where your marketing and advertising comes into play. And it is clearly directly related from that. Depending on the segment that you're going after would determine the kind of advertising strategy that you use to reach out to them. In addition to that, the segmentation will also drive how physically the product reaches them. And that's really important, as I mentioned, if the product is a physical product and not a digital product. The segment, the geography, the trait that you're looking for in the target customers, that should drive where the product physically becomes available. The next thing is, once the product becomes available to the target audience, why would they choose your product? And this is what is called as differentiation. And a lot of effort has gone into it because the situation that we are here in today, most of the products or most of the needs are being met by multiple products. So why an end consumer or your target audience picks your product over a competitor's products becomes critical. So some of the questions.
So Vikas, we have a question that just came in from Rashid. So I'm going to hand it over to Rashid to ask his question.
So hi Vikas, during the initial part of your conversation, you mentioned that there is defining a strategy and developing a strategy, and defining a strategy is not part of your role. Could you please share some examples to explain the difference between defining and developing strategy with respect to PM role?
So, okay, maybe it came across like this. Defining and developing strategy are used interchangeably.
Okay.
So I don't see them as difference. The difference happens in the role around whether you're part of defining or developing strategy, or you're not. You're more focused on the execution.
Okay.
So that was the difference I was trying to draw. And if to dig a little bit deeper, so for example, in some organizations that are following Agile, if you are a product owner role, for example, and then you have somebody else who's more of a business product manager, the business product manager may be looking at developing the product strategy, whereas the product owner may be more focused on executing on the backlog that is coming out of that strategy. So again, and talking at a product strategy level, like I said, strategies are at different levels. So you could look at within a product owner's job as well. He could have his strategy at his level too.
Okay.
So that's what I'm at a product strategy level. I'm saying within product management, there are some individuals or some groups within the product management functions that are responsible for creating it, and there are certain groups who primary responsibility is executing on them.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Great. And so that's all the questions we have at the moment. Keep the questions coming in. Keep them posting to the productmentor.com/live. And also, Vikas, when you do share, if it's possible for you to hide that display along the bottom of the screen, that thing, that message that says you're hiding, that would be wonderful. Thanks, and take it away.
Okay. So coming back to differentiation, so there's a lot of literature in strategy around how do we go about differentiating. But the key question here that you have to ask yourself in a very, very genuine and objective way, that will your target audience pick your product over the alternatives that they have in a truly objective way. And if you do not have an answer with a reasonable level of confidence to that, you need to do more work to figure that out. So how do we go about differentiating? So the first thing I want to tell you is that you got to look at competition. What is competition doing there? But just copying competition will not give you the differentiation. You have to look at, oftentimes you have to look at into more deeper customer needs and see how those deeper customer needs can be addressed that could create an opportunity of differentiation. So let me give an example. So for example, if you're a drill making companies, and you look at the drill to say, hey, does the customer need a drill or does the customer need a hole? The customer doesn't need a drill, the customer need a hole. So the need is customer needs a hole. But if you dig deeper, why is the customer needing to dig the hole? Well, he really needs to drill the hole to hang a painting. So he doesn't really need to dig the hole, he just needs to hang the painting. Now, if you come with an alternate product that allows the consumer to hang the painting through a different mechanism, let's say a Velcro mechanism, that avoids the hassle and the inconvenience using a drill, you're meeting the same need with a different product. And you're differentiating, in this case, by offering a product that does not have the hassle of, okay, drilling it and the dust goes around and so on and so forth. But you could dig even deeper. The need is not just to hang a painting. The need is to make the room look more aesthetic. And that need can also be met, for example, by getting a painting onto the television screen, which is there already, which is what Google Chromecast does naturally. So if you have a situation where you're putting the painting because you have visitors coming in your room and you need a nice aesthetic picture, instead you're meeting the same need by Chromecast, where you put the picture on the TV and then the picture keeps on swapping itself every so often as well. So you're not even getting one picture, but different picture at the same time. And here's an alternate product, differentiated, meeting the same needs, but completely differentiated. All the way from the drill to getting the product onto Chromecast. So that's an example as to how you dig deeper into the more fundamental need to determine how you could address the same need in a different way and thereby creating a differentiation. Another point I want to make here is differentiation versus creating new markets. So like I said, a lot of literature is there in strategy around differentiating, and a lot of organizations with their products also tend to focus on differentiation. But there is an alternate school of thought which says that instead of trying to differentiate and meet the known needs of your target segment, you identify the needs that have not been met by anybody. In other words, trying to meet those needs that have not been identified, or if they have been identified, those are not being met today at all. And in this case, the argument there is that you're going after an uncontested market space, so to speak, because nobody is actually trying to meet the need at all. So let me give an example. One of the examples there is the conceptualization of the minivan. So before the minivan was created, there were SUVs, there were sedans, coupe, and so on and so forth. But there was this unmet need, so to speak, of families with small kids, and that created this minivan, a new product category with doors that slide out, with features like much lower level of the floor, so young kids can climb up easily, with a switch for the driver, so the driver can switch off or close the door without having to step out of the seat, and so on and so forth. So in this case, Chrysler in this case created a completely new, what we call as a product category, by addressing needs that were not being met by anybody else at all. So moving to the next one around the target audience being able to use the product. So the point I want to make here is that if you look at 5, maybe 10 years ago, a lot of the focus on this was on products delivering certain utility, certain benefit to the end, to their target audience. And as long as that benefit is delivered, you met your objective. But more recently, it has also gone to a point where it's not just delivering utility, but also what kind of feelings and what kind of emotional experience is being delivered to the target audience while you're delivering that utility. And more, especially in the technology product, more and more the focus has shifted towards delivering not just utility, but utility along with a certain emotional experience. And that's so that user experience to me is part of whether the target is being able to use the product, and whether the product is able to deliver the kind of emotional experience that you're wanting to deliver. So moving on to the next one, how will the product, is the product meeting the internal objectives? So this is where it ties on to your monetization. If it is, if you're running a for-profit product, what would be the price be? What would be the pricing model be? Will it be direct monetization or indirect monetization, so on and so forth? All those questions have to get answered by this. And if you are a non-for-profit organization, then what is the impact that you're trying to make, and how is this product making that impact that you're trying to make? Measuring and tracking the difference and achieving the internal objectives. So here there are a lot of options. You could think of a lot of metrics. You could look at product usage metrics. You could look at net promoter score metrics, but you have to pick 4 or 5 critical metrics that give the overall view. Think of it like a dashboard view. And these metrics objectively tell you that the difference is being made and the internal objectives are being made. So a lot of times you would come up with these metrics, but you would not have the capabilities to measure this, which is fine, but then you have to make a call whether you need to develop certain capabilities or certain systems to be able to measure those metrics. The other alternate is to look at what is being collected already. So for example, if you're looking at financial metrics, your CFO organization might be collecting those metrics at your product level already, in which case you can then reuse them. But essentially, the key here is to get those critical metrics and measure them and track them. Because as Bill Gates says, whatever gets measured gets improved. If you're not even measuring it or tracking it, you don't even know whether you're improving it or you're actually making those metrics worse. The final piece is, what capabilities do we need to make it all happen?
So we just had some more questions come in. So the first one's from someone anonymous, and they're asking if strategy definition is ultimately the role of your boss or your boss's boss, how do you suggest introducing your own strategy viewpoints to them?
Correct. So I'm talking a little bit further in the next section about it. And in terms of whose role it is to develop product strategy, it's if you're in the product management function, you should see it as part of your job, whether you own it or you don't own it. Your boss may own it, or his boss's boss may own it, or you may have a parallel organization that may own it, but it is still your job to contribute towards it and work towards it. And I'll touch upon it in the subsequent section.
All right. And the next question comes from John. So let me hand it over to John to ask his question. Or as now that I remember, John can't speak. So I will ask his question for him. John's asking, in large organizations, how do you achieve alignment on strategy? Oh, yeah. I see the note for Jeremy, my audio doesn't work. I got it now. I'm good.
I would just say hold on to it because I cover that in the next section as well. Right now, I'm just going through the process of developing strategy, what you need to do to come up with that strategy, and then I'll touch upon other areas, including how do we socialize it and get alignment.
Excellent. So awesome. That's all the questions we have at the moment. Keep them coming in at theproductmentor.com/live, and we'll keep passing them along to Vikas. With that said, back to you, Vikas.
Okay. So I was at the last point around what capabilities do we need to make it all happen, and this this is where the strategy has to identify what capabilities do we need, and then that has to funnel into the execution plans. And that execution plan could be a roadmap, for example, for the R&D organization. It could be a marketing plan for the marketing organization, sales plan, and so on and so forth. But the whole idea here is that when you develop this strategy and you find answers or you pick options in each one of these areas, it is your job as a product strategy developer to make sure that these options are consistent across amongst themselves, and that these consistent options are driving the functional plans and making sure that the functional plans are also consistent among themselves. Especially in large organizations, you can run the risk of these different functional groups running in their own individual silos, if you will, trying to optimize within that silo, but then not necessarily consistent or coherent with the other functional areas within the organization. So that's where the product strategy role comes in, to keep those functional plans consistent and aligned. The other thing that I want to mention here is that as you develop this strategy, you would come up with these actions that have to be taken. You also have to look at, as you take those actions in the market, how will the marketplace evolve? How will the competition react to it, for example? And then you have to anticipate, in some cases, how will it respond? And then how would you respond to that? It's almost like game of chess. If you take this move, they could make that move, the other move. If they make that other move, then you would make that move. And so on and so forth. So you have to think through those possible future moves and be prepared, or think through, if those future moves happen, then what a different set of options you will pick within these areas, and how those different set of options that you pick will continue to help you achieve the aspiration that you're aiming to achieve. So that's at a high level, how you go about developing strategy. Now I move into the next section. Like I said, how you individually could benefit from product strategy. And how you benefit would depend on what your current role is. You could either be in a role where you're not developing strategy, but you aspire to develop that, and I'll touch upon what you could do in that kind of a role. Or you could be in the product strategy execution role, not so much in defining, like I mentioned earlier. Or you could be developing product strategy. And I picked developing product strategy at the very end purposely, because if you are in that role, then the discussion gets a lot more detailed, because you can get a lot more detailed in each of those areas, what are the options, and so on and so forth. But I still wanted to cover more on the first two roles. So what if you're aspiring to develop product strategy, but today you're not? So the first thing you do is you connect with whoever is developing product strategy, and share with them that you aspire to do that. And from their perspective, when they're developing product strategy, they would most likely know that in order to develop a good strategy, they need broad perspective from different areas. And if they find somebody else who's aspiring to contribute, they could possibly include in any kind of discussions, workshop, or whatever method they use in developing strategy, they could use you and get your perspective into the mix. So that's first thing. The other thing about is you have to develop your skills in developing, in being able to develop a product strategy. So how do you improve your skills such that they find you attractive enough? And the way to improve that skill is actually by doing it. At least that's my view. You can read about it. There are a whole lot of frameworks around strategy. There's a lot of literature. But to me, there's a whole lot of learning that happens when you actually develop your strategy for your product. So what I would recommend in that situation would be to follow the framework that I mentioned and go ahead and create a 4 or 5 page strategy for your product based on what you know. So list down all those, list the strategy on all those dimensions that I talked about earlier, and then objectively assess it. Are those options the right set of options in order to realize the aspiration? Are there gaps in there? Are there things that you think should be done but are not being done? Or are there things that shouldn't be done but are being done? So create that, and that creation of the strategy document will help a long way in developing your skill. Once you've done that, socialize it. Socialize with, again, with the product strategy team or your peers and say, this is what I think we are. What do you think? And that would help you broaden your perspective. It may highlight areas that you're not either aware of or you haven't thought about, and so on. The next thing to do is to get a better sense of your business strategy. And what I mean by business strategy is the strategy that at a higher level, depending on your organization, it could be a portfolio, or a business group or a corporate strategy. Understand that, because your product strategy is within that strategy and it has to be aligned. So as you develop a better understanding of that, it puts you in a better position to be able to develop your product strategy aligned with that. And the other thing you could do is to develop really deep understanding of your target customer. Because at the end of it, a lot of the strategy work is driven by the customer insights that you have. And having that customer insight or that deep understanding of the customer in itself can be a differentiator. On the contrary, if your organization has poor understanding of the target customer compared to your competition, then at best, it would be a disadvantage. And at worst, it could kill the product. And if it's a single product company, it could even potentially kill the company. So develop that understanding. How do you go about developing that? So there are various ways you can go about developing it. It just depends on the situation. But if I were to put on a continuum, what are the possible ways and what are the easiest ways? Beginning first, which give you the least insight, and going up, difficult, but giving you more insight. So you could start with internet and see what information about your target customers is on the internet. You could look at analyst reports, which give you a little bit more insights. You could attend events and meet a lot of people at the events and develop a better understanding. Going a level further, meet with your customers and talk to them. And going the final level, which is actually observing the customers. That's where you can get the most insights. See how they're using it. If it's a software product, see how they're installing it, when they're installing it, how exactly they're using it. This is where you will get the real insight.
So Vikas, we just had another question come in from Jordan. So let me hand it over to him to ask his question.
Hey Vikas, how you doing? My question is in your experience, is there a obvious or even tangible difference between the way people talk about their product strategy versus the product roadmap itself, or is one just a deliverable of the other?
Yeah, so the way I visualize it, To me, product roadmap is derived out of the strategy, and product roadmap is to me more of a execution plan that tells what the R&D organization will do in a given time frame. So the way I look at it, that the product roadmap should be driven off of the product strategy. Does that answer that question, Jordan?
Fair enough. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. That's all the questions we have at the moment. Keep them coming into the productmentor.com/live. And man, we got to buy Vikas a new hard drive. And for those of you also joining and hearing Jordan's question, Jordan's going to be our next mentor speaker, our live talk, and Jordan's going to be speaking on product managers needing to know things that no one else knows, and Jordan's going to tell us all how to do that. But before we jump ahead to that next talk, which starts in about 15 minutes or so, let me hand it back to Vikas.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. So moving to the next role we talked about, if your role is that of executing product strategy, how can you benefit from it? The first step is to clearly understand what the strategy is. The more you understand it, better you'll be able to make your own decisions, for example, as to what goes in the roadmap and what doesn't go in the roadmap.
Vikas, we're not seeing the slides.
Okay. So the next step is to align your execution plans. And I gave the example of a roadmap, but if you are part of a marketing organization or if you're part of the sales teams, align whatever execution plan you own to your product strategy. The other thing you can benefit from is to communicate that strategy to your team. Communicating that is telling the execution team, let's say developers in your case, as to why we are doing what we are doing. And it often lends more meaning to their jobs and thereby increases their level of engagement and level of motivation. It also helps that certain smaller decisions that they may be making on their side, they can make better decisions because they are aware of the overall product strategy and whether the smaller decisions are aligned with the strategy or they're not aligned with the strategy. The other thing that you could benefit from is providing your inputs to the people who are developing product strategy, as I was mentioning earlier. And don't underestimate the amount of contribution you can give. Because oftentimes what happens is people doing product strategy development are more market focused and they're not as close to technical innovations. Innovations, like I mentioned earlier on, that could make certain segments more attractive than they were, or make them attractive enough to be chased without those innovations. And so go ahead and share what you see and in terms of the technical innovation, also in terms of the organizational capabilities with them so that they can adjust the product strategy accordingly. You should also seek input from your teams on those two dimensions because they may have a better view than you do. And the idea here is that structurally you want to have a mechanism that these inputs are going all the way into the product strategy development team so that they can develop a more refined strategy. And finally, if you're developing a product strategy itself, getting buy-in and getting buy-in into the strategy and also aligning the respective functional execution plan is a critical piece of it. And one way to do that is to involve the people in the actual development of strategy. It should be that the execution team feels that it is their strategy, not something put together by the strategy team and dumped on them. So that's one way to get buy-in, and you have to have that culture all during the cycle. So for example, when you conduct reviews or you set up these meetings around it, even if you change the title to getting feedback on strategy as opposed to communicating the strategy, small things can also help in getting that buy-in and getting that alignment. The other thing on getting the buy-in is distinguish between what data you have and what hypothesis you're putting in product strategy. And often your product strategy will have some data and some hypothesis. Consciously keep them separate and say, this is the data, and we don't have the rest of the data, and we're making a hypothesis. And a lot of times, once you share the data, you would get the buy-in based on the data that you have. And a lot of times, even if the data is not there, you explicitly acknowledge the hypothesis. That itself could also get buy-in that, yes, we know it's a hypothesis because we don't have the data around it. Coming back to the reviews again.
We had a question that just came in. I'm going to hand it over to Vipul to ask.
Hey, Vikas, you mentioned about developing.
You're very faded.
Yeah, Vipul's mic seems to not be working, so I will ask his question for him. If you have any different target customer, small, medium, and large enterprise, do you define a strategy per target customer or a strategy that is applicable across all types?
Depends what your product is.
And Vikas, what do you?
Depends what your product is, and if you have multiple segments that you're targeting at the same time with one product, then yes, then your product strategy has to cover both segments. If you're defining a strategy at a segment level, which oftentimes you don't, then you would cover just one. But you would, if your product is going after two segments, you have to have one strategy covering both the segments, because all the other options that I talked about could be different across the two segments.
Excellent. All the questions we have at the moment. Keep them coming in. theproductmentor.com/live. Back to you.
Okay. So the other piece around doing strategy reviews. So you have to do these reviews very often because the market keeps on changing frequently, and you should always keep on evolving your strategy document. And some of the questions to go over the reviews is around: are we really realizing our aspirations? Are there opportunities that are out there related to unmet customer needs that we could chase? What are the most promising technical innovations out there? What are the key threats? Which competitor is really troubling us the most? That's the kind of conversation you want to have in the reviews, and not just sharing, okay, this is the new strategy and what do we think? And finally, I stress this again, developing the deep understanding of the target customer. Because customer understanding or customer insights is at the heart of it. And if there is one thing that you can take out of this session today, is to do whatever you can at an individual level, organization level, structurally, to gather, capture, disseminate, and utilize customer insights within the organization. Do that. Because that in itself can be a big difference in making your product successful. Back to you, Jeremy.
Awesome. Thank you very much to our speaker, Vikas Batra, Director of Strategy over at Nokia, for today's talk on developing strategy for product managers. And as always, the presentation will be posted to our SlideShare channel. And also a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, and everyone else who joined us today, and the product mentor. And also, if you're interested in being a product mentor, because heck, we can never have too many, like today's speaker, Vikas, to product people of all sorts, please visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And I know what I'm buying you for Christmas, Vikas. It's going to be a hard drive. It'll be SSD. That is the loudest hard drive I've ever heard. But everyone, guys, thank you guys for joining, and I'll see you guys all next time. This is a whole day of live stream. So those of you joining us, you get to watch behind the scenes, which is so exciting. You can watch me stare at a screen or watch me fiddle with lots of monitors. So our next live stream, our next mentor is going to be starting in about 4 minutes, probably about 4 or 5 minutes. That'll be Jordan, who you heard ask a question a little while ago. But I also noticed that we had some other, oh, look at this. All these questions are flying in. So Vikas, if you've got some time for some more questions, I'll throw them away. I'll end up cutting you off at 11. But let's see how many we can kind of squeeze in here. Let me throw it over. Actually, before we do all the squeezing, Vipul, could we try to get your mic working again? Could we test you one more time? Oh, it's not working. You might, if you reboot. Sometimes, if the mic's not working, if you do a reboot of your computer, that does the trick, and then we can hear your lovely, harmonious voice. So you might want to give that a try. With that said, I'm going to go over to Rashid, who had a question for you. Rashid?
Yeah, I was unmuting my microphone. So Vikas, question for you is, how do you keep organization focused on product strategy when there are multiple functions, multiple influential functions who keep on changing the goalpost?
Multiple influencing functions that keep on changing.
For example, like if you have a very influential sales organization, or say some service organization, who have great say in shaping the strategy, and based on their opinion, if we keep on changing the goalpost, how do you keep people focused on the strategy?
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on the situation. From what I can tell, what I would do is I would capture the strategy in the 3-4 pages that I mentioned and disseminate that. And if that captures the aspiration well, or the goalpost, like you mentioned, well, then every time somebody changes their goalpost, then you trigger a strategy review. Let's say, okay, last time we said this is our aspiration, now we're changing this as the aspiration. And it may be okay, as market insights become available, you might want to change it, but then keep a track of it. And if you sense that the aspiration is being changed every so often, not giving enough time to execute, then that's a structural problem that you can again bring up through data that says, okay, over the last 6 months, we changed our aspiration 3 times, and that doesn't give enough time for us to execute, and therefore there's a problem.
That sounds good. So in summary, have more reviews and bring problems through data.
Document it so you have data to back it up, and then if you're seeing a situation like you're saying, you should back it up with data and say this is a problem because this is the data that's telling us that's a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Another question that was posted anonymously, and those who are posting anonymously, we love anonymous people. They're mysterious. But if you log into your profile by clicking that hamburger in the top left part of the page, we'll know who you are. So one of the anonymous questions is, what are some of the key differences in the approach of developing product strategy between B2C and B2B products?
So the way I articulated it, from a functional perspective, it's the same approach. It's just that you have a different target segment or target audience that we talked about, and you would have to follow different approaches in terms of developing the insight or the customer insights for them. But once beyond the customer insights piece, the points that I walked through apply to both B2B or B2C products. And I know, Jeremy, we are closing, getting to the top of the hour. If any of the mentors or mentees have any of the questions that have not been answered, feel free to reach out to me. You have my information. I'll be happy to chat.
Clicked all the wrong buttons. Let me just see if we have a product which customers not doing using. How do we engage them? Yeah, so I'll throw the question to you, but maybe if you want to post it to the YouTube page or the Meetup page, that might be a good place to answer this question that I'm throwing at you. I think this is going to be a little bit longer than the time we have. So Vikas, the last question is, if we have a product with customers, if they have a product where customers are not using it, how do they engage those customers? That's a good question. That could be a talk all on its own. So we'll put that in our back pocket, and Vikas will try to get back to whoever this anonymous person was. Again, nice and mysterious. Thank you for that. With that said, we're going to hand it over to Jordan in just a moment. Give me one more second, folks. Everyone, thank you for joining us and bearing with me as I click my 5 million monitors in front of me. Hold on. Boom, and boom. That's how we do it. Okay. Where am I? I don't know. And also thank you for those of you who were joining us And we had a little bit of hiccup with YouTube for a few minutes in the last talk. Hopefully, YouTube and Google have worked the kinks out of their system, so we won't have any more of those. And with that said, how you feeling, Jordan? Such a happy face you're making right now. Like that?
Okay, sorry, it took me forever to unmute. I feel great. Ignore my face. It's just my face. It's not indicative.
I like that. I'll get you a T-shirt that says that. Ignore my face. All right. So everyone, just mute yourselves, and we're gonna get going in just a few seconds here, as I just make sure I know what I'm doing again. All right. Here we go. And it's Jordan, if you keep yourself muted until I call on you too, that'll be super duper. All right. It's Sunday, April 13th, 2017, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by one of our mentors, Jordan Bergtraum, and he's going to be leading a talk on product managers need to know things that no one else knows, and how do we do that? I think he's got a more succinct title at this point, but that's the title I like to use. Jordan's also a product management consultant guru, top exec at a lot of really important places. For those of you who may be just joining us for this hour, allow me to just briefly explain the format. The people you see along the bottom of your screen here are mentors and mentees in the current session of the Product Mentor program. And we'll have them quickly introduce themselves in just a moment. For those of you, what the Product Mentor program is we pair one mentor and one mentee up for the duration of about 6 months to help make better product people. These are people who are currently in product management, but different levels of experience, different backgrounds, and we try to help everyone up their game a little bit over the course of those 6 months. And it's all around the world in over 20 different countries. If you're interested in being a mentor in the program, we always could use some more. So check us out at theproductmentor.com. Read the FAQ. That still sounds good to you, then definitely sign up to be a mentor. With that said, let me just quickly do some introductions around the room, and I'm going to start with the person closest to me, and that is Vipul, if his mic is working.
All right, hopefully it should be working now.
Yay, it is working. Introduce yourself, who you are, where you are you a mentor or mentee, and anything else you might want to add.
Yeah. So, hello everyone, my name is Vipul Musale. I'm a product manager for a company called Cornerstone On Demand. We are one of the world's largest talent management companies based in Santa Monica, California. So yeah, happy to be part of the mentorship program, and I'm a mentee.
Excellent, and we'll go to Vikas next.
Yeah, hi, my name is Vikas Batra. I'm a director of strategy at Nokia. I'm a mentor, and I'm based out of New Jersey.
Excellent, and over to Shirzad.
Hi everyone, my name is Sherzad. I'm a product manager.
Hey Shirzad, could you turn your video on?
Yes. Here it is.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Sherzad. I'm based out of Berlin. I'm product manager at Here Technologies, and I am a mentee.
Oh, excellent. Now I'll unmute myself as I say that. To Rashid.
Hi, I'm Rashid Manzar. I'm based out of Toronto, and I'm a mentee, and I'm product manager at ADP.
Next up is Lee.
Hey guys, I'm Lee. I'm a product manager from Melbourne, Australia, and I'm a mentee in the program this year.
And Jordan.
And I am Jordan Bergtraum. I'll be the presenter for this session. I've been doing product management consulting for over a year now.
And last up is John, if he's able to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. It's so exciting.
Hey, everyone. I'm John Kress, product manager at Barnes & Noble, working on the mobile website. I'm a mentee in the program based in the East Village. Glad to be here.
Outstanding. And a little bit about myself. I am Jeremy Horn, aka the product guy, and I'll be moderating here today. So as you have questions, thoughts, things that you'd like to send along to Jordan, post it to the Q&A section at the bottom of the page at theproductmentor.com/live, and I'll pass it along to him in fairly real time. If it's topically related, I'll get it to him nice and fast as soon as he finishes whatever current thought he's working on. And if it is a little bit more generic, like what is product management? Where am I? Why am I here? Those types of questions, I will still pass along to him, but I will save those to the end. And please do log in. We like anonymous is interesting, but we love to know who we're talking to. So we love to see some names get posted in there, especially when you're not from a person in the room. With that all said, it's time for me to hand it over to Jordan to lead his talk.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. Title of my presentation, as Jeremy already mentioned, is that PMs need to know things that no one else knows and how to make that possible. On me, that's where I'd like to start. I've had 7 years leading product management functions across a number of different verticals, ranging from education to manufacturing, pharma, legal, facilities management. As you can see, there isn't a lot of consistency in these verticals, but my experience is pretty broad, and I do understand product management across a number of different verticals. I have a total of over 10 years of B2B SaaS experience. Always been in B2B. They've all been SaaS companies, the subscription-based pricing model. So I tell you that because that's my lens, and that's what I know quite well. There are definitely other experiences product people have, such as coming out of the B2C world, or even working on internal tools that are not for sale but are used exclusively by the employees of a company, and a product manager could be responsible for those tools. I've twice introduced mature product management to organizations. I view a lot of what I do as both the inbound market research function, which I think is super critical to the product management role. If we're not researchers, then I don't know what we are. As well, I've been responsible for the outbound product marketing, meaning the message that we want to get out to the marketplace and a message that will excite the marketplace. So let's start with what you can hope to get out of my presentation today. What does knowing more mean? Right, we got to start there. We got to set the groundwork for knowing more, because that's a pretty vague statement, and I appreciate that. Why this is important, okay? It might be obvious to some of you, but it also might not. And how do I get to a place where I know more than everyone? That's right. It's one thing to say there's something that's important you need to do, but without giving you some ideas on how to get there, I'm not so sure this presentation would be all that valuable to the folks on the call. So let's just start with an idea. Do you need to know more than your boss? How about the head of client success? You sure do. Even the head of sales? Yep, you sure do. Even the CEO of my company, the top dog, the big dog, the guy that or girl that's supposed to know more than everybody else? Absolutely. Doesn't matter who they are. But you get the idea. My point is you want to put yourself in a position that you know more than anyone in the company. So what does knowing more mean? So let's start with knowing your market or product space better than anyone. Well, that's pretty obvious. That's not a bold statement. Let's go a little more about what that means. So think of it in terms of depth, right? Understanding a particular problem more than anybody else. That's one example of what I mean by depth. It's just going deeper. So some of the client services may be well aware of a problem that exists that your company's not currently solving that maybe they should, but it would be it's my expectation of a product person that you will eventually, after you find out about this problem, know it better than them. At a deeper level, take it even further, understand the details at a higher level. And breadth. So I know that's asking a lot, but it's just the job. And by breadth, I mean understand the breadth of various opportunities your company has, right? Know more of them. Be familiar with all of them, but also familiar in depth as well. So the idea is you are, and anyone else in the company, to understand how many different opportunities for your product exist and understand each of those opportunities better than anybody else in the organization. So of course, and now, little detail on that, customers and prospects better. Think both in terms of not just your existing customer base, but I say prospects as well. There's an incredible amount of learning available to you by talking to potential customers that are not yet customers, and those that eventually do select you, but even more so those that don't select you, and figuring out and getting to the information on why they didn't select you can be super valuable to you. Of course, data. Data is a very hot topic, and having data to support your decision making can be incredibly powerful, and having data that nobody else does as well, and going after that data. Also understanding your competition to a degree that nobody else does. And usually this means having a greater volume of it. There may be a number of people in your organization that have some familiarity with what's going on with the competition. A lot of times it's your sales function. They learn this by talking to prospects that are at the same time talking to your competition as part of their selection process. And through that, your sales function often comes across a lot of useful information about what your competitors are doing. But it doesn't also mean that you can't layer on top of that looking at, of course, your competitors' websites, but also just looking at what's going on in the news, right? Being tapped into getting alerts anytime anything about your competitors pops up in the news, and subscribing to that. When you add all this together, both what sales knows, what you research, what's going on in the news, and bring that all together, that's a useful tactic for understanding your competition more, knowing more than anybody else in the organization about your competition. So in general, think of it in terms of a greater aggregate knowledge. There will always be maybe people in your organization that know one thing or two things that you may not know yet or may not know ever for whatever reason. But the knowing more concept does have an aggregate perspective to it. You need to know 37 different opportunities, while, if that person only knows one or two that you're not familiar with, well, that's okay. You know 37 of them that they're not as familiar with or not familiar with at all. Okay, so let's talk about the why is this so important. So our primary jobs in many ways is to build the right product. And that's pretty hard. I'm not going to say that's easy. And our jobs are never, well, I'll never describe them as easy. We're expected to do a lot of different things, wear a lot of different hats. But at the end of the day, all of that should be mostly focused around, like I said, building the right product. So, but in order to get there, you have to be able to defend the right product. There will always be people coming at you with other opinions. And this is even harder. It's hard enough saying, okay, here's our roadmap, here's what we're going to do. But in a lot of organizations where people have strong opinions about what the product should be, where it should go, what it should do, how to best please the marketplace, that's even harder. It's definitely harder than doing the research to just identify what that roadmap should be. Here's another thing that I think is super important for all product people to remind themselves of. The product needs to be right. You do not. In order to get there, the you do not part means you need to have humility as a product person and not let your ego get in the way of building the right product, having the right roadmap that will get you to the right product. I've seen a lot of product people that once they build a roadmap that they are bought into and comfortable with, there's a rigidity that can set in. And then there's an ego that sets in about, okay, now I need to just defend this roadmap to the death. I will put someone in the Vulcan death grip if I have to, because I am convinced that my roadmap is right. But that's not it's not the issue of you being right. You need to have the open-mindedness to care more about the product being right. And oftentimes the product being right means a new idea has come in and it is actually an idea that is higher value to your organization than the things on your current roadmap. And just remember that. So your product being right oftentimes means your current roadmap is wrong, and that's okay. So what does wrong mean? Well, wrong means a lot of different things, and it means a lot of the obvious things that you guys know. Don't build something that makes no sense. But in my context, wrong could also mean, keep this in mind, a great idea at the wrong time. I'm used to having in front of me 37 amazing opportunities to drive the product forward, with the runway, meaning the resources over the next 6 months, to do 5 of them. And to me, wrong is picking one of those 37 that isn't the top 5. Okay, that's the definition to me of having the wrong roadmap. So what does right mean then? Well, right at any given moment means you're working on the most valuable opportunity for your organization, whatever that means. Now, I can't define how to get to the #1 idea. I'm not going to do that in this conversation, but I think we all appreciate that that makes sense, right? At any given moment, the #1 idea on the roadmap should be #1 for a very good reason, meaning it is the greatest opportunity for your company at that point in time. So let's go back to the why. Why do I need to know more than everyone else? Well, one of the hardest things as a product manager to do when you're in that defending your roadmap phase is to get the confidence of other people in your company. Some of the people I've already mentioned earlier in this presentation, like your CEO, the head of sales, the head of client success. They will all look to challenge you if they don't have confidence in you. And even if they do have confidence in you, they still may challenge you. But by having more information about your marketplace, it will put you in a position where you will have the confidence of other people in your organization. Knowledge is power. For that, I love cliches, I guess. To defend the right product. I spoke about that earlier. If you are in a position where you understand the marketplace more, understand why the roadmap 1 through 5 looks like it does, why #3 is #3, and why #3 is not #2, and you can defend that, okay, that's how you maintain getting to the right product and not let external influences that don't know as much as you bully you, for lack of a better word, into making changes to your roadmap that aren't the right thing to do for your company. So why will you need to defend your roadmap? Not all of you have been in this situation. I imagine many of you have. But when I say defend, I really mean, in the face of someone really feeling strongly that what you have on your roadmap is, in their mind, not accurate, meaning misordered, or there are things that they don't see on their roadmap that they think should be on there. So let me just be very clear with you. In my experience, you will be challenged. I have almost never put up a roadmap, okay, with, let's say, 5 great ideas, here's the top 5 in the order we're going to do them, and not had at least one person challenge me, if many, such as sales, client success, the CEO. I can almost promise you that if they're doing their job at the level that I think they should be, they will challenge you, because they're going to have their opinions and their needs to help them be successful in what they do for the company. Like I said, they have their needs, as I just said, but they also have their biases. Okay, you got to keep that in mind. So they will have differing views of what's right for the company, and you shouldn't expect that the needs of sales, for example, and the needs of client success, I would never expect those to align. I will never in 100 years expect the head of sales and the head of client services on their own to come up with a list of the top 5 things that they think are best for the company and expect those 5 to be the same. In my experience, it's never happened. Sales is all about trying to find new opportunities in the marketplace to acquire new customers, while client success's job is to keep your existing customers happy. There's no reason to think that those roadmaps, those needs, will overlap, okay, in their entirety. There may be some, think Venn diagram, right? There'll be some overlap, and I would expect there to be some. But the question is how much, and it's definitely going to be, I think, more on the less than towards more. So what's your job in all of this? Well, your job is to defend what you know is right at the business level. meaning sitting above what just sales needs, what client success needs, what your help desk needs, what anyone else, even the CEO, even I'm serious about that, even what the CEO needs. Okay, you're at the level of what the business needs. Okay, so that's why you should feel empowered to say, okay, look, head of sales, I understand why you need what you need, but this roadmap exists and for these reasons. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you know more than the head of sales, if you understand the marketplace better than the head of client success. So I'm a big believer in you got to come with facts. You got to come with, and part of facts would be data, right? Facts and data are very powerful. We all are, I would imagine, are pretty familiar with this. But the key is not opinions. Don't just come with your opinion. So let's just jump in. Well, what's wrong with opinions, right? A lot of people have gotten by in this world on having a strong and valued opinion, okay, and been successful, okay? And we're all kind of, we all have an ego, and we all think our opinions are valuable, right? Who doesn't? But there's a reason not to. The reality is, in the world of, our world of being product people, putting together roadmaps where so many people are gonna have such strong thoughts on it, opinions have very little value. Okay, they really do. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. Your opinion will not be just adopted simply because it's your opinion. As a result, opinions are often challenged by everyone and anyone that has their own strong opinion. The real problem comes in reality, the way these meetings go down. If you're in a room and you got a number of different people in there and you're looking at a roadmap together, that title trumps opinions always. What I mean by that, here's a perfect example. Everyone's talking, everyone has their opinion what the roadmap should be, and if all that's being thrown around are opinions, the person with the highest title in that room, that's the only opinion that matters. That's the person whose opinion is going to win the day. And that's not always a good thing, okay? Because even the CEO, if what they're coming with is their opinion, but it's not as informed as it could be, and by the way, don't always expect your CEO, okay, to know more than everyone else. They have a very, very busy job. Imagine that your company's in a cycle of you're a startup and they're fundraising. You can imagine how much time it takes a CEO to get out there and raise money. I can tell you it takes an incredible amount of time talking to the CEOs that I know. It in amongst itself is a full-time job. So don't expect them, if they're going through fundraising rounds, as an example, to be really tapped into what's going on in the marketplace over the past, let's say, 3 months while they've been fundraising. They won't. But in that room, they'll come with their opinion anyway, and they'll tell you what to do if all you have is opinions.
So we have a question. We have a question that just came in.
Yep.
From Hare Krishna. So I'm gonna. Go ahead.
Basically, roadmap discussions and internal B2E, internal platform discussion, especially where you're catering to a very sophisticated audience that hates any change. It's basically FUD at a very internal level, but how do you navigate that? Sometimes facts don't really fly as well.
Jordan, you'll have to unmute yourself.
So what I was asking is, what does fly? If it's not facts, what does fly in your organization? What is the most likely thing to drive the roadmap then if it's not facts?
I think it's a mix of personal relationships and helping people remove their FUD. Whenever they think about any sort of their platforms that they used to for the last 6-7 years, their concerns primarily stem around, hey, this is going to be a big change for our modelers or for our quantitative guys who don't really know what they're doing most of the time, especially in the tech stack. And it's essentially a lot of personal relationships more than data that actually drive some of these discussions. So that's one thing I've struggled with quite often.
All right, that is a tough situation to be in. Now, I still would like to believe that in that world, information, know-how, facts, data should be able to trump that. It sounds like you might not have the right people involved in your roadmap discussions, where it sounds like it's individuals with their own needs and a lot of politics going on, which is always not an easy thing to tackle without knowing the specifics of what the politics are. But what might be useful to you is take your roadmap discussions, if you have to, up a level to people that are sitting above the people that are just looking to serve themselves, and to people that have a mindset of trying to serve the greater good, the organization, doing the right thing, and get them bought in. So those that are just, you know, kind of more involved in the politics and helping themselves with through the roadmap, almost get overruled if it has to go that way. So that might just be the way it goes. Is if you truly don't believe that what they're saying the roadmap should be is right, escalate.
Makes sense.
Awesome. So questions coming in. Whoops, getting some feedback from you there, Jordan. So keep the questions coming in at theproductmentor.com/live. And with that said, let me hand it back to you, Jordan, so you can unmute yourself and take it away.
Okay, so back to the slide. Breadth, depth, and data will trump all. It really should. I have rarely been in a situation where if I'm bringing them hard facts that I can't win the day, again, create the right product and the right roadmap to drive that. Because it's easy to defend. It is much easier to defend when you have any hard data, or you've interviewed, 5 different customers, spoken to 3 different prospects, and what all this data and conversation has led to is, here's 1 through 5, right? So again, back to what I was saying earlier, I just like to reinforce things. This will allow you to stick to the right product, meaning not let your roadmap be derailed by the opinions of others with big titles. So again, here's just a few thoughts. Building the right product is what makes any of us rock stars. Rock stars are the ones that get acknowledged. Rock stars are the ones that get promoted. So if you're looking for a reason to not just come with your opinion, this is the end game, right? Not just doing what's right for the business and creating the right product, but on a selfish level, if you're trying to internalize what's in it for me, this is what's in it for you. This is the way I think about, the people that have also worked for me. It's all about when they ask me how do you assess product people? At the end of the day, I say, I assess your ability to build the right product for this organization. That's what I'll tell them. That's how you get recognized, and that's how you're going to, move up to the next level in this organization and as a product person. Okay, so here's a common question I've gotten when I have spoken to people just about this topic in general, and I want to get ahead of this question by basically asking it for the audience. Can I know more by just talking to people that work for the company? Right? There's so many smart people here. I really believe they know what they're doing, and I really trust them. So the answer I'm going to give you is no, not really. I just don't believe in that. I don't believe that as a product person, just taking the information about ideas and opportunities for the organization and researching them and shuffling them into a roadmap, because this is what the company already knows. These are ideas that have already been floated, discussed. There's an awareness of it, and tapping into the internal knowledge capital that exists is, truthfully, it's not that hard. A lot of people can do it, and it doesn't require a true product manager's skills necessarily to do this. Now, one caveat: if you are a product manager that works on internal tools only, where there is no marketplace, there are no external forces that you need to worry about, there are no customers, and there are no prospects, well then, I get that. You live in a different world where all of the know-how, all of the ideas are being generated internally, and this does not apply. But if you have software for sale in B2B, B2C, then I strongly believe this does apply, that just shuffling around what you know from talking to people that work for your company is not enough. So it is possible to come to the point that you know more than any other single employee by knowing what all the employees know through aggregation. But again, I don't think that is the end game for a product person, because I don't think that is the best way to get to the right product. It's just not as valuable as knowing things no one else knows, meaning ideas, opportunities that don't yet exist within the walls of the organization. We're researchers. Sorry, we're researchers. We're not order takers. Big believer in that. We do not exist to serve, okay, the various departments in the organization, like serve a salesperson that needs something badly, to serve a client success person that, you know, is trying to get a client off their back by just delivering something that they badly need. That is not the job. Truthfully, in my mind, order takers, those that just listen, hear things, and just say, oh, okay, I'll do that, or, oh, you think that that's the new #1 idea? Okay, I guess, you know, I agree. Sure, that sounds good. I'll make that the new #1 idea. There's a dime a dozen. I met plenty of junior, early career product people that are just order takers, and they're easy to find, and they're not differentiated, and they're not adding anywhere near as much value as I think they could be. And at the end of the day, again, if we want to internalize this and be a little selfish about who we are and why should we, you know, worry about these things, trust me when I tell you, order takers do not often get recognized. They do not often get promoted. Okay, it's just not how you stand out and differentiate yourself. Okay.
So a question that just came Rashid.
So hi, Jordan. You mentioned that if you speak to the customers, say 5 different customers and 3 prospects, you can use that data to convince people and suggest your point. But how should you respond to the pushback that number of customers that you have spoken to does not represent sufficient sample size, or it is not statistically significant?
It's a good question. Okay, so I would love for statistical significance to be there, but in the worlds I've lived in, B2B, enterprise, SaaS, you can do surveys but the kind of conversations I need to have are too high touch to be done on paper. They have to be done in meetings, high touch conversations where you can explore. So that being said, I think the end game that I'm trying to get you guys to is the more aspect. So you have a client services rep who's come to you, or even the head of client success comes to you and says, okay, you know, with their pushback, oh no, I've just heard this great idea. I've heard it a lot. Okay, and I think it's the greatest idea I've ever heard, and I really, really, really think we should do it. My first question to them is, okay, that sounds, and a lot of times the idea is great. I'll say to them, 1, okay, I want the list of customers, okay, that you've spoken to, because I want to get to the facts, because a lot of times they exaggerate it. Trust me, they love to exaggerate how many customers they've heard this stuff from, because they're just trying to, they get excited about it, and they're humans, and they'll say, oh yeah, I've heard this from easily 8 clients. I'm like, oh wow, 8 clients, that is amazing. Okay, that does sound really interesting. I want to talk to these customers because I'm gonna have to dive in. I'm gonna have to dive in with them to learn more about this. I need to know who they are. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I definitely spoke to customer A and B and C, and I'll have to get back to you on the others. And that's learning for you. That's one, okay, it's learning, but also the reality, what I'm really trying to tell you is, okay, what you will then do is take this idea and you'll explore it further. You should go talk to not just the customers that they spoke to, but go talk to the customers that you know, the customers that you have relationships with. If you in a perfect world, you know, and I usually have this, I have an advisory board. That's the first place I go. I have every 2 weeks a call with my customer board, and I can bounce any idea off them and get the opinions of 8 customers like that. And that is very powerful to defending whether that idea that this client success manager just told me about, how like real it is. Now look, sometimes those 8 come back at me and be like, oh my God, that is amazing. I love it. And yes, I think it's better than the other ideas on your roadmap. Most of the time, the reality is they don't. They say, oh no, that's interesting. I would want it, but I don't think it's a top 5 idea, and I wouldn't disrupt your roadmap for it. So I think that's more, right? That's knowing more. That puts you in a position where you're definitely knowing more. If you have that quick access to 8 customers that you could tap into to validate quickly any idea that comes in, and then be able to go back to, and here's the key, you got to close the loop. That you got to go back to that, let's say, head of client success, and tell them what you found, and say, hey, Bob, Sarah, whoever it was, I researched this, okay, and I spoke to the advisory board, which is comprised of customers you know that you're super familiar with, and the reality is it's a great idea, but it's not a roadmap idea. They all agreed it is not a top 5 at this point in time, So, you know, it's just not something that's going to hit the roadmap. And that's how exactly how I'd handle that situation. Is that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Cool. So the next question comes from John Francis. And John is asking, let's see, what is he asking? When do you know when you have enough data to back up your idea?
I'm going to give you a really easy answer to that. When it's more than everybody else's. When you if they've spoken to 3 customers and you've spoken to 6, you're going to win the day because 6 trumps 3. It's not about, in my world, it's not about statistical significance because I'll never get there, right? If we have 200 customers, I'm never going to get to a statistically significant sample in the hours in a week that I have available to me to put to this. I just won't. It's the reality. And surveys aren't enough. I just, yes, I can get to significance through surveys, but that's not, I can't gather the kind of information I need through like just a email survey, SurveyMonkey type situation. So truthfully, the answer to your question is, that's why I'm saying just know more. You don't have to know everything, but the way you defend your roadmap is to make sure that you know more. So if they have got feedback from 3 customers, you get feedback from 6. If sales has spoken to, you know, 2 prospects, you speak to 4, right? Just make it more. So you can go back to them, okay, saying, I understand this problem better than you do, and here's the answer. Like, I've gotten more information on this. I have more facts and data than even you do, and here's what the result is. And sometimes the result is you're 100% right. Okay, you came with a great idea. I'm with you. It's the new number 3 on the roadmap. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. It's not always, the answer is not always no. And a lot of times is no, but the answer is not always no. Is that helpful? Does that answer your question?
Hope so.
I'm going to assume silence is yes.
Yes. Well, it came from someone else. I think you answered their question. And so everyone, guys, keep your questions coming in, theproductmentor.com/live. And back to you, Jordan.
So let's get into the fun part, the how. How do I make myself this cape-wearing superhero you speak of, Jordan? Because you make it sound so easy, and I appreciate that. And this is not easy. I am not saying that knowing more, okay, is an easy thing to undertake and that everyone can do it, but I do believe it's something to aspire to, and it's something that you should at least try. So, a couple of ways. Research, of course. Get out there, okay? Get outside of the 4 walls of your organization, okay, and learn about what's going on. And that ranges from some of the obvious things like things I've already mentioned. Talk to more customers than anybody else, okay? Talk to more prospects, but also research in the sense of like, research what your competitors are doing. Research what's going on by going to conferences, right? Research what's going on by subscribing to publications. These are all things that are at your disposal. And by adding all of those together, okay, you get to the know more concept. Oh, whoops, there's everything I just said. Market, customers, users. But the other thing is like, do it more often, right? You should be having these conversations with customers frequently. So you're staying fresh, so you have recent information. And like I mentioned earlier, go deeper with these conversations. Understand every problem that's brought to your attention to a degree that's greater than anybody else in the company would really appreciate it. Ask questions. Ask a lot about what the problem is. Ask how often that problem is happening. Ask how much time, cost is associated with the problem each time it happens. Okay, that way you can come up with some numbers around how big of a pain point the problem is. Ask them who's involved in the problem. Ask them how many departments, which departments. Ask them if their senior management cares about this problem and how much, right? These are the ways you get to like depth. And also variety, okay? Understand, okay, your marketplace, okay? That's part of like breadth, right? Not just like breadth in terms of just sheer numbers, but understand the problem from the perspective of your different segments that might exist in your marketplace, right? Have a conversation with at least one person in each of the different segments so you can appreciate which segments will find value in this idea that's just recently come up. I'm a big believer in those of you that have ever listened to me talk probably about anything when it comes to product. You probably heard me mention advisory boards. I am a huge believer, especially in the B2B context. In B2C, they probably have a significantly less value, and I'm not saying don't do them in a B2C, but if you're in a B2B enterprise world, I will tell you, okay, that my advisory boards have been more valuable to me in defending my roadmaps than probably any single resource, simply because the power it brings to me to be able to go back and say, okay, within a 2-week time frame, right? Because I'm meeting with them every 2 weeks. I took it to the advisory board. Here, that you know that it's comprised of our 10 biggest customers that we care about the most, love the most, think are the smartest, biggest, baddest, bestest customers ever. And here's what they said. And the truth is that they love the idea, right? And they want it on the roadmap. So we're going to do it. Thank you. Or they love the idea and it's not a top 5 is what the feedback that I'm getting. So I just can't right now justify interrupting our roadmap for it. And the other part of the advisory boards is, yes, there are a lot about high-touch conversations, but they also can yield data that is very powerful. So for example, if my advisory board after a conversation on an idea says to me, yes, I think that's a fantastic idea, and then I ask the follow-up question in our meeting, do you think it's potentially, here's our roadmap, here's what it looks like right now. Is this possibly as better than any of the ideas that are here? And if enough of them, and enough being a somewhat, I'm not going to quantify that, let's say half, I'm making that up, say, yes, I think so, then I'm going to tell them, okay, offline, after the meeting, I'm going to send you an email, and I'm going to ask you to prioritize this new idea. I want to know exactly where you think it belongs. And they'll send me a ranking. They'll say, I think this should be the new number 2. Someone else will say number 3. Someone else will say the new number 5, so on and so forth. And I can then collect all those answers. Now, it's only going to be, let's say, like anywhere from 8 to 12 respondents. But in my world, that's plenty significant enough to say, okay, not only does this belong on the roadmap, but here's where they say exactly it belongs. I've got the data now to support why it's number 3 and not number 4 and not number 2, right? So I can even use these advisory boards to get to the data and the facts that I earlier promoted. And that's another reason why I'm such a big fan of it. Know your prospects. This is one of the hardest things I think a product person can try to go after. I'll be honest with you, is super challenging. Now, the easiest way is what you see here, attend sales engagements. Okay, meaning, okay, just ask a sales guy you have a good relationship with, and if you don't, create some relationships with your sales team and ask them to just listen in. All you're gonna do is listen. You're not there to talk. You just wanna learn, you just wanna hear, okay, how prospects talk about their needs, what they ask about the product, what they ask about the company, it's everything they say. You just wanna learn and start and just listen in. That's one amazing way. Another, much harder, much more time consuming, but much more valuable, is conduct win-loss analysis. Either by doing it yourself, which is what I've had to do in my past because I couldn't get the budget to have someone else do it. If you are in a bigger organization where the dollars are there, it's even better to have a third-party company do it because there's no bias in them doing it. There'll always be some bias in you performing it because most of the time they know what company you're with. And hence, they're not going to be as forthcoming about giving you negative feedback because they're afraid of hurting your feelings. And by the way, I've done a talk on win-loss analysis in the past. If you're super interested in more about win-loss analysis, why it's awesome, how to do it, you can go to the YouTube channel that Jeremy stood up and listen to that. And that's probably the best place to learn more about, like, okay, what does that mean and how do I do it? I'm going to not get into any more detail here. And of course, talk to more prospects than anybody else, or at least a broader array, a broader variety. I wouldn't expect you to be able to talk to more prospects than any one salesperson would because that's their day job and not yours. However, across the spectrum of different types of customers, I think that's powerful. So the reason for that is that puts you in a position where no one salesperson knows more than you about the whole marketplace, and they can't kind of bully you through a greater depth of knowledge than you have on what prospects are asking for. And again, just a reminder, even with prospects, go deeper with them. Go deeper into why they're asking for certain things of your product that you don't necessarily have right now. Why is that? What problem are they trying to solve? Because a lot of times they will ask for solutions to a theoretical problem that isn't in your product, but once you understand what the problem is, you could then realize, oh wait, we actually do solve that problem with our product just through a module that they didn't realize, that prospect didn't realize we have, and maybe even the salesperson didn't even realize they have. So by doing that, you can work around problems that prospects bring up, but it's just good learning to go deeper with them and always be asking them, get to the root, be a PM, and you guys all probably know this, okay, ask the why. And they ask for, do you have feature XYZ? Always politely ask, oh, that's interesting. No, we don't have that right now. How would you use it? When would you use it? In what situations would you use it? All trying to get to the why, the problem behind it. absolutely research your competition. Know what they're doing, of course. Okay, you don't want them to be able to leapfrog you too easily because you just didn't realize, okay, that they were about to come out with something that you could theoretically know about, because sometimes to get marketplaces excited, even on their websites, sometimes they tip their hand about what's coming out. There are companies out there that will give you some idea of what's on their roadmap because they're trying to excite, okay, customers to come to them instead of you. So they'll be a little open about what they're going to be working on. As I've also mentioned, conferences can be powerful. You can learn a lot about the direction marketplaces are going by going to the right conferences to learn about what they're talking about the direction that their marketplace is going. And what that oftentimes yields is opportunities for you to find new problems that will generate. And anytime there's a problem, that is an opportunity for a product person to consider, should we make an attempt to solve that problem, because it sounds like it's going to be a big problem that they're going to need solved and they're going to be willing to pay for. So at the end of the day, all these things I just gave you of places to go to gather research, of course, bring this all together, right? Don't leave it in their individual silos and don't treat them as completely necessarily unrelated components. Because at the end of the day, everything you do needs to funnel into a singular roadmap for your product that you're working on, or for a singular roadmap, even theoretically for the entire company at, let's say, like the product suite level, depending on the level you're working at. But your role is that if you have the most holistic view, if you can say the reason why like number 2 is on here is because not only are current customers asking for it, but I've done a number of losses, like a number of prospects that went with other customers have also been asking for it. Oh, and by the way, it's a pretty hot topic being discussed at a conference I recently went to. Imagine like the power, okay, of being able to say all that, if it's of course true, when someone challenges like, oh, I think that this should be the new number 2 idea, right? So by having information from all these different angles and sources and keeping that holistic opinion of your product, and it's not just about keeping, let's say, existing customers happy, or about like, oh, staying ahead of the marketplace and we got a leapfrog and that's all we need to worry about because we need to make a marketing splash. Maintain that big picture view of what are the greatest opportunities for your product.
We've got a question that just came in from John.
Hey, Jordan. Hey, Jordan. This is John. Great talk so far. Thank you. My question dovetails into something you said earlier. I'm working with, let's say, high-touch colleagues like customer service, work with a lot of customers. They want to put stuff on my roadmap, but they're bringing pre-baked solutions to me instead of customer problems or needs. How do you train colleagues across the organization to think about problems?
Okay, so there's 2 ways of looking at that situation. If they're bringing you solutions, which happens all the time, and I think we've all been there, that is not uncommon, you have 2 options. You can try to ask them personally to go back and learn more about like why they're asking for that. I wouldn't do that. I would just do the research myself. I would say to them, oh, that's interesting. Who asked for it? And can I have their telephone number because I want to explore it more, and do it yourself. Because also don't expect a help desk person, a client services person, even a salesperson to be properly trained or have the mindset of knowing how to explore backwards from feature request to problem. That's not their action, not their job. It's actually ours to do that kind of exploration and work backwards that way to get to the why of an ask for a particular solution. So I think my best answer to you is just say, okay, and then go do it yourself. Don't ask them to do it. Okay, I think you'll do it better than they will.
Cool. That's all the questions we have at the moment. Keep them coming in at theproductmentor.com/live. Back to you, Jordan.
All right, let me summarize, because I've thrown a ton of stuff at you, and I want to make sure that there are some key takeaways that you guys can, walk away from. And, there's only so many bullet points the human brain can consume in 1 hour of time. You're going to forget most of what I probably told you, but there's a few things I want you to just really remember. 1, opinions have little value. Opinions, nobody usually is a fan of someone's opinion. Breadth, depth, and data will trump all. Certainly opinions, and will trump other people's facts, because if you have more of that, more breadth, depth, data, you're more likely to be right. Okay, and you'll be able to defend your roadmap as to why you created it the way you created through the breadth, depth, and data that you have, but also use that to deflect the distractions of, oh, some crazy idea that, even your CEO just came up with. This breadth, depth, and data allow you to create the right roadmap. It's all about the product being right and creating that roadmap. But even more importantly, you'll notice one word change here, and it puts you in a position that you can defend the right roadmap that you've created. Right? Think of it this way. There is no value to you going out, creating a roadmap, you personally knowing it is 100% the right thing to do for the company, you're super confident, but if you can't defend it well enough to keep it as is, and you let sales, as an example, derail you into altering your roadmap so it is completely sales-centric, and now all of a sudden you're going to end up with retention problems because there's nothing on the roadmap for your existing customers and to keep them happy, especially in the subscription model where they're paying you to use the software every year. And part of that expectation is that the product will get better over time at no necessary additional cost during at least the duration of their contract, right? Don't let that happen. It is your job to be able to defend it. There is no value in putting together a great roadmap that you know is right if you can't keep it right. So that's why defending it is so super important. As I mentioned, remember, the right roadmap will result in the right product. The right product will make you a hero. Trust me. That is how, you get recognized in your organizations. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you attending. Hope this was helpful. And that concludes.
I've got a question that came in just now from Vipul, so I'll hand over to him.
Sure.
Hey, John. Thanks. That was a great talk. I wanted to know one of the components of knowing more that I have experienced in my professional experience. I've learned a lot from our development organization, specifically the developers of my product. To hear some of your thoughts around, how do you distill that information? Because sometimes it could actually influence that you take in terms of prioritization, in terms of roadmap, in terms of solutioning. So how do you kind of balance when it comes, and how do you also accept or kind of solicit that feedback from your own development organization of your product?
I think I need you to clarify your question for me. Are you asking how do you prevent your developers from derailing your roadmap, or something else?
No, but it's more around how do you best capture feedback from your developers about your own product, because because their feedback is going to be heavily biased depending upon what product they have, which may or may not meet customers' need directly. And the reason I ask is when I join an organization and when I'm inheriting a product, I may not necessarily be aligned to the roadmap, to the strategy. I align to some of the features that the product has built, and the development organization, they may have certain way of thinking in terms of why the product was built, to kind of build that.
Okay, so that's a good point. Early on in your existence in any new company where you obviously will not be knowing more than everyone else, yes, that's a different phase, and you will be more in the phase of being like an order taker from those that at the time know more than you, until you get to you've done all your research where you know more than anybody else, right? That takes time. The point is it takes a lot of time. So I appreciate that, and you're right. Thanks for bringing that up. I think that's important for people to realize is don't expect to be that hero from day one of your organization, or even if you got switched to a new product, that may put you back, right, where you don't know more than anyone else. I appreciate that. Now, when if you're getting a lot of feedback on what the roadmap should be from your developers, my answer to how do you deal with that feedback is simple. I don't treat my developers any different than any other audience that is bringing me ideas, whether it be engineering or client success or a customer that I'm having a conversation with. Everything needs to just like go through my process of vetting the idea, prioritizing the idea, and then ultimately if it's decided, oh yeah, we got to build this, then design, of course. But it's no different. They are just one of many resources that have great ideas, just like a lot of other people, and I will take their feedback like anybody else's. I don't give them any more or any less weight than anybody else. I tell them that. Unless now there is one caveat to that, where if what you're talking about is what I would call technical debt, and they're coming at you saying we have to do that, okay, that's a different beast, because that does not go through the same process. I'm not going to take technical debt to my advisory board. They're not going to care. That's just not in, they won't be able to understand it. That is a different conversation, and I can't even get into the technical debt conversation here, as it'll take up too much time. But I will say to you, yeah, that is a different issue, and giving your engineer, giving bandwidth within your available resources to technical debt is very relevant and should be taken seriously. How seriously, I can't tell you, because I don't know enough about what you're working on and what else other opportunities are out there. But that's different, and that goes through a very different process. Did I answer your question or no?
Yeah, no, it did. And in fact, I may want to reach out to you separately or offline on that specific aspect, because we have certain opportunities where there's a lot of technical debt. And then for me, the bigger challenge is I understand the benefit. I can communicate the benefit to a certain type of audiences. However, when it comes to the larger audience, the advisory board, or even customers, I'm having some trouble in doing that. So I'll reach out to you offline on how to best communicate that.
Sounds good.
Specifically on the technical debt.
Technical debt, sure. Feel free.
Cool. We got another question that just came in from George Steiner. As a product manager at a small startup, how do you find the time to do the research? I spend a lot of my time on executing the roadmap and solving tech problems.
Yeah, no, that rings. I hear you. Especially when it is an early stage startup, and a lot of in those situations, right? The expectation is you are there to worry more about execution than we'll call it market research. I get that. So how do you make the time? There's no easy answer to that. But what I can tell you to do, just as a conceptual exercise, is to try to look at the things that you're doing that you don't feel necessarily add that much value, okay, to the world at large. So here's an example I can use, and I've told my people, the people that are on my teams, to do this. So there's a lot of support that product managers do that they don't factor into how many hours a week that we do. Answering questions from client success, sales, anybody, right? We become this like go-to catch-all bucket of, I'm just gonna ask the product manager. One thing that you could consider is stop answering those questions the first time, okay? Unless it's like the CEO of your company, right? I get that. Because if your opinion is they can answer the question themselves and they just don't want to take the time to do so, because it's faster for them to go to you, you're just basically enabling them to waste your time to save themselves time. And that's just not a great balance to have. So one of the exercises I tell my team to go through is don't answer those kind of questions the first time. They'll probably go figure it out on their own. Okay, once you don't answer them in like, an hour, okay, because they're going to be under pressure to tell get to answer the question for their client, and they'll just do it themselves. So wait for them to ask a second time. I know it sounds a little aggressive, and I know like everyone wants to be helpful, and you want to be like a team player, especially in a startup where like everybody wears multiple hats, and we're all just doing everything we can to make the company move forward. But there are definitely certain low value activities that you can, I'd say, do less of, like answering questions for people, and take on much higher value activities like, hey, how about go have a meeting with a big client, okay, and just learn more about what they're doing, what's going on, what problems they have that you're not addressing, what their pain points are. Way more valuable than answering a question for a client success person, in my opinion. So look for those areas where you're just kind of like doing the right things. It's easy, but isn't super high value, and replace that with market research type activities. And there are other examples of like things but it's hard for me to, give you concrete examples without knowing more about, of course, where you work, what your real role is. So I don't want to get too deep in because I don't want to misdirect you and tell you not to do things that are just going to get you fired, because that would be terrible.
We do try to. That's all the questions it looks like we have right now for Jordan. So I want to thank our speaker, mentor, longtime mentor, Jordan Bergtraum, product management consultant, on his talk on product managers need to know things that no one else knows, and how do we do that? Also, as always, the presentation will be posted to our SlideShare channel. And a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, aka the product guy, and everyone else who joined us today, and the product mentor. Also, if you're interested in being a product mentor like today's speaker, Jordan, to product people of all sorts, please visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today to be a mentor. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And with all that, thank you guys, and see you all next time. Bye. All right, so now we've got minus 2 minutes before the next one starts. All right, Harry, you good?
Yes. Yes.
You ready?
I'm ready.
We've been having weird hiccups with YouTube all day. So I've been, if I look upset at some point, it's because I'm angrily looking at YouTube. So they've been doing some weird things. So those of you who are joining us or sticking with us, looks like a lot of you guys have been sticking with us. Appreciate that. Yeah, we've been having some hiccups. If the live stream disappears, just stick around. It seems to come back. Just know that when it disappears, I'm screaming inside my head. So let's see here. Let me just get set up with everything for the next talk. That's good. All right. We're going to get going in just a moment. All right. And just as a reminder for everyone, please leave your video on at all times. Keep yourself muted. That includes the speaker as well. Sometimes we get some weird feedback, so just keep yourself muted until I call on you. I could start singing. Should I sing for our large audience online? All right, folks, here we go. Talk number 3 today. Oh, let me just stretch. Oh, I haven't moved in a while. All right. Talk number 3. Here we go. It's Sunday, August 13th, 2017, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today, we're joined by one of our mentors, Hare Krishna Menon, product manager at 2 Sigma, to lead a talk on lean customer development. So those of you who maybe haven't joined us before, this is the Product Mentor, and our mentors do a lot of talks in the program. We open it up to as many people as we can. The Product Mentor program is in over 20 countries around the world. They get paired up, one mentor and one mentee for the duration of a session, and we're currently in session 7 to help make better product people, better product decision, and sometimes better products as well. With that said, let me just, I want to do some quick introductions, go around the room. I'm going to start with the person closest to my left, at least on the screen. And we're going to go to Vipul. Just to briefly introduce you. Who are you? Are you a mentor or a mentee? Where are you? And anything else you might want to add about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vipul Musale. I'm a product manager working for Cornerstone On Demand, based out of Santa Monica, California. We are one of the world's leading talent management companies, and I'm a mentee.
Outstanding. And over to Shirzad.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shirzad. I'm based out of Berlin. I'm a product manager at Here Technologies. And yeah, I'm a mentee.
Rashid?
Hi, I'm Rashid Manzar. I'm based out of Toronto, and I'm a mentee and product manager at ADP.
John?
Hey everyone, I'm John Kress. I'm a product manager at Barnes & Noble on the mobile applications based in the East Village of New York, and I'm a mentee in the program.
Hare Krishna.
Hi, I'm a product. I'm a mentor at the product group. I'm a product manager in Two Sigma Investments, a hedge fund based out of New York, and their platform engineering team.
Mentor in the Product Mentor program, to be more specific. And I am Jeremy Horn, aka the Product Guy, and I'll be moderating here today. So as you guys have questions about the topic, post them to the Q&A section directly below the video. So if you're on the productmentor.com/live, videos at the top, questions are at the bottom, just post them. As long as they're topically related, I'll get them over to Hare Krishna in fairly real time. If they are more generic product management or life questions, I will still ask him those questions for you, but I'll save them till the end of the talk. But with all of that said, let's get going with the talk. I'll hand it over to you, Hari.
Thanks, Jeremy. Let me just quickly share my desktop and switch. Jeremy, can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sounds good. Today, I'm here to talk about lean customer development. So I'm going to start with a little anecdote. Around 2 years ago, I don't know how many of you know how product management works at Microsoft, but Microsoft traditionally probably started the product management role in its truest sense around 25 years ago when Excel came into being. The role has gone through a number of transitions. Essentially, until probably 3 years ago, it was a mix of being a project manager and a program manager. What it meant was, hey, you plan out your team's releases, you plan out every single schedule, you run your scrums, you run the boards, do everything that you can. In addition to talking to customers, designing features, speccing these humongous 60 to 100-page specs out that last your releases for that last for releases up from 1 to 3 years. A couple of years ago, the kind of focus a little changed. We soon realized that Microsoft being at that point, Microsoft was very focused on the Windows ecosystem. So we kind of knew what we want to build. But when we were going to mandate to go make money wherever we wanted to, it was really hard for us to build the right product for our customers because we had no idea what folks in Linux or Mac or people outside of a developer ecosystem or outside of using our platform wanted us to build. So it was a very new experience for the entire program management team. So we started thinking about how do product managers operate out in the wild in startups and other companies like Google and Facebook, and the whole discipline changed a bit. One of the key things that introduced that change is lean customer development. This is, it's a popular term in the lean startup series, and luckily for us, the person who wrote the book, Cindy Alvarez, was a user researcher in Yammer, and she kind of trained one of large parts of the program management organization into really understanding what lean customer development was and how to use that to build really good products that people will buy. So one of the direct outcomes of this, we doubled the active user base of Visual Studio from around 1.5 million to 3 million, kind of following some of the principles outlined in that process and how generally people think about product management. So I want to give you a feel of like how it, what the process looks like. It's more of an academic understanding of what of all the things that we do inherently as product managers. So what is lean customer development? It's basically an expanded version of build, measure, learn. You form a hypothesis, and the hypothesis could be as a customer, we feel that debugging X or Y service in the cloud is hard. Then you find potential customers who you think generally has this problem or generally has this core pain point. Then you interview as many as customers as possible, this is a statistically significant group that, like Jordan mentioned as well as what came up in one of the questions. Finding the customer is not enough. You have to ask the questions the right way. You should not lead them. They should be able to proactively tell up your pain points, and that is the way you should be able to validate a hypothesis. Once you get to that, you have you probably do 30 to 60 interviews. At the end of the day, you have so much information. Like, how do you collate all that info and try to understand what your product direction should be? And finally, You go build something that you believe your customers wanted, measure, keep learning, repeat the process over and again as many times as you need. Now, I want to jump into specific steps of this process. The first one is forming a hypothesis. It always starts with, I believe, a type of person. In my example, when I was at Microsoft, it was always a developer. So I believe a developer experiences a kind of problem. A problem could be anywhere between they find it hard to build services in a PaaS infrastructure like Azure or Google Cloud or AWS, while performing a task. A task for that would be solving a business problem for the company or building a service or an application that the company really wants, and then they grow to their success. There are two kinds of hypotheses. The one that you start off with is problem hypotheses that you essentially come up in very early part of the product planning process. You have a set of hypotheses that you want to validate. And when you validate those hypotheses, you might come with a set of solution hypotheses that you think are the right ways to approach and fix the problem. That possibly also requires more talking to customers to make sure you're building what they really need and not building something that you think is the best product out there. Focusing on the problem is very important. When you think about problem hypotheses, you're not thinking about the feature or the design or how you're going to actually sell it to your customers. It's purely focused on really understanding what are the key points your customers are facing today with your product. It should be very testable. That means it should not be either really broad or really narrow or of not sufficient depth that you can never make sense of the answers. If you had examples where your hypothesis was overbroad and you had to take a set of statements from n number of customers to make sense of it, then that's not a good hypothesis. You have to break down a hypothesis that would essentially be answered by many customers when they're talking to you about their pain points. As narrow as you can get is better. So let's say you have a problem hypothesis. Now, the next step would be finding customers. This was pretty hard for us especially as Microsoft, when we started thinking about folks in Linux or the Mac OS or in using other cloud services, we had to really dig hard to find the right people. Some of the common things that we used was LinkedIn, obviously. Everyone has great networks. We can reach out to a few folks and see if they're interested in chatting us for 15 minutes. Reddit, especially, if you do Reddit religiously, you would know certain subreddits that are very core to your domain. Making a name for yourself out there, getting some karma, establishing some rapport with some folks there makes it much easier for you to get them into a call with you so you can really understand their pain points and their key concerns. Facebook, surprisingly, for certain set of products really well. Certain set of products it doesn't. Twitter is another great avenue because if you follow the key influencers that your product line actually speaks to, then you would find a lot of followers who follow those influencers, and then you can reach out to them or DM them to see whether they would be a good fit for you. Quora is often overlooked, but an actually really good source of this info because being a very moderated, very rich a site that has a lot of editorial oversight, you do find really good nuggets of information and the kind of customers that you might want to reach out to, or at least some headway into, hey, these are possible companies that might be interested in my solution or have issues with the kind of, or have issues in the space that I'm exploring, and that would be interesting. Then you can follow up on LinkedIn and go find the right people. Domain-specific websites, you do find a lot of these really very niche websites that possibly, talk about certain parts of your product. And following those websites, trying to find user information, there's another one. Real-world locations, one of the interesting things that we did, we actually, as a part of the exercise, we had to go stand, it was nothing great a product, but we literally had to go stand in a bus stand or like the train station and talk to random people about some hypothesis we're doing. It was to get the confidence up the product and program managers to really get out there, not be shy, think out of the box and how the ways you want to interact with your customers, as well as it really helped us solidify the 5-minute elevator pitch that we wanted to tell our customers that, hey, this is why you should talk to us. Funnily enough, people have used Craigslist in the past. Personally, I have found it completely useless, but for certain aspects, certain products that you might be building, Craigslist is also a really good example. In my last slide, I have given a link to a blog post that somebody wrote, 95 ways to find your customer, which is pretty interesting. It's an exhaustive list of the different kind of sources you can reach out to find the customers you're talking to about. This is especially important when you are in the very nascent stages of your product when you really don't have a product, you're trying to break into a new market. If you have an established product, you can use things like the customer advisory board that Jordan talked about. You might have established really good connectivity with a set of customers that you can call up on a bi-weekly basis to talk to them. But when you're starting in a new area or a new segment that you have no exposure to, you have to really get out there. You have to go find the right people to talk to. And these are some of the ways that you can. Let's say you found customers. Let's say like you have tried your best. You possibly, you didn't have time, or you were not successful in finding the right customers. You can do a couple of other things. There's a bunch of user research platforms like Validately, UserZoom, Etniel that you can reach out to. And if you give them a very good write-up of this is the kind of customer I'm looking for, these are the market segment, this is the age, demography, everything that you need, they would actually go out there and try to find the set of customers you want to talk to. An issue with this approach is that they generally will never share the customer emails or anything with you. They will do all the meeting calls and everything set up by themselves. So you're probably not going to build your exhaustive database of people you want to reach out in the future, but at least it's a good way if you don't have the time or if it's really urgent for you to reach out to one of these platforms to do that work for you. We have even done Mechanical Turk. We basically scraped a bunch of emails that we thought was interesting. We paid some folks in Amazon Mechanical Turk to go scrape all these emails and give a list of emails that we could use to reach out to some other customers. There are other things like affiliate programs. You could leverage partnerships with other companies. One that's often overlooked is if your company has been for a while and has a bunch of partners, there are a lot of data sharing agreements that you as a product manager might not know that exists. So there's no harm in reaching out to your business and saying, hey, is your partner sharing some customer data with us? Is there a way for me to get in the CRM system? And is there a way for me to get those emails, those contact information out so I can reach out to those customers? So at least in Microsoft, because we have a significant partner program, we were able to actually use some of our partnerships to get to the right set of folks that we want to talk to. You might know better ways to find customers, but these kind of gives you an overview of what you can do by yourself to find customers, as well as use user research platforms or leveraging partnerships to find the right set of folks to talk to. Let's say you found that your customers, right? You have to have a script. What are the right questions? So I personally believe only in asking 5 questions from an entire interview. And I try to stick to those 5 questions irrespective of the problem I'm solving, especially in my early stages of product, a problem hypothesis, because I felt those questions have gotten me the maximum mileage without ever leading my customers down into answering the questions or giving the problems that I want them to tell me or I want to hear. So the first one is like, it should basically be things like, hey, what are you doing today? How do you accomplish tasks? Just listening to that gives you a whole lot of ideas about what the current pain points for customers are. Specifically asking about pain points makes the customer think about, hey, what am I really doing that really pisses me off? There's this very good analog, rats versus dents. If you had a rat in a house, you would call the exterminator the very next day or right that moment, because that is something you cannot live with. A dent in your car, if it's not too much, you probably wouldn't be that worried about it. You might, go for a couple of 3-4 months before you think about taking it to a shop and getting that fixed. So it is really important when a customer talks about their pain points for you to differentiate between rat and dents. Rats, if you can solve a rat kind of problem for the customer, they will change their behavior to buy their product. But if you're just trying to solve a dent problem, there is no guarantee they're going to change their behavior to buy or use your solution. So it's very important when a customer talks about their pain points for you to empathize and really understand what rats and dents are. Deal breakers and constraints. These come a lot more useful when you're thinking about solution hypothesis. When you give a solution hypothesis to a customer and ask for his feedback, it would be really interesting to understand what are the key deal breakers? Are there any security, regulatory, et cetera, constraints that they cannot ever get around with and has to be part of your final solution? Also, it is important for you to understand what the decision process for buying looks like. You might be talking to, let's say, a really senior principal architect or an architect of the company to talk about your solution, but it's not necessarily he's the right person to make the decision. To buy your product. It could be his managing director, it could be a VP. So it's really important for you to understand, hey, how does the decision process in a company work and how you as a product manager can work with your business and sales team to enable the customer who's interested in your product to actually start the decision-making process and navigate that successfully. That might include you giving a couple of pitch decks, couple of easy-to-use material that they themselves can then take up to their management and get more information about. Finally, the interview. Digging a little more into the interview, the first question that you always do is you should always ask, outside of your intro and saying hi, is tell me how you do your job today. And it is okay to have huge moments of silence. I know it's awkward, but when you're silent, you make the customer talk more. A lot of people really like, to hear their own voices, and you just have to encourage them a little bit. So when you just ask this question, you can really understand what they do today to actually solve a problem. And from that, you'll be able to get a better understanding what a rat versus dent is. Once that question is done, you might want to ask to get a little sense of a market understanding. Do they use any existing tools or processes to get their certain work done? It gives you, you might have done a lot of research to understand what your market looks like, what your competitors look like, but this question also might give you more information about other users or other companies that you have overlooked during your research, and that gives you pointers to go and dig into more going forward. Once you get a basic understanding of how they work around the issues today and what kind of tools and processes they use, then you talk about the biggest pain points. So this is the meat of the conversation. This is when the customer is encouraged to tell you about the things that really piss them off, things that really depress them, the things that they feel that they don't want to come to their work the next day for. And you have to get as much information about this from your customer as possible. When you have a set of customers that talk about the same pain point, now hey, there are some ideas that are coalescing together. There are some problems that are more important than other problems. And then you can focus on building a solution hypotheses for those kind of issues. Finally, the one fun question I always ask is, like, if you had a magic wand and you could change anything about how you do your task today, what would it be? People have come with some crazy answers that might be completely outside the realm of what your product is trying to solve. But it is interesting to just say that, because a set of these magic wand answers give you somewhat of the North Star or the epsilon of what your product could be in the longer term. So this question kind of gives you an understanding of what the aspiration for the customer is. Like, where does he really see his workflow being, like 3 or 4 years from now? And it gives you also an understanding what your product could be in 3 or 4 years from now to make the process easy for your customers as possible. Finally,
just had a question come in from Rashid. Rashid, I think your question, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sure, Jeremy. So Hari, my question is, product managers are expected to do customer development. At the same time, some companies have UX researchers as well who do the user research. How our approach should be similar to or different from that of UX researchers research? And should we partner with them, or is it fine to delegate this activity to them?
Hare Krishna, we're not able to see you.
Okay, let me just get out of my full screen. Can you guys? Okay. Let me have to stop sharing. Okay. That's an interesting question. And even at my previous job, we did have user researchers. They are a resource like any other, right? I have always felt that you as a product manager could delegate some tasks. For example, if they are working with an external resource like Etni or things like that, you can make the US researcher help you navigate that. But I've always felt you have to be part of the conversation. You could be a silent partner, but you have to listen to that conversation. You could let the UX researcher lead the process in many cases, but you have to be present, because it's really difficult to convey empathy. Even really good user researchers find it hard to really communicate like what the customer was saying, and they might have a different perspective from you. But when you're in the conversation, when you really hear that, it makes a huge amount of difference. They're like any other resource. You have to use them because it makes your job easier, and that's why they're there. But you should not skirt out of the fact that, hey, let them go do everything. Let them give me the write-up. I'm just going to trust that blindly, and that's what I'm going to use. Some good UX researchers also tape all the conversations, right? So if you can't really make it, I would highly encourage you to listen to the tapes, because that also gives you a sense of understanding, of empathy. But that is a key part. Like if you just trust a write-up from a US researcher, you might be missing a key empathy or the key emotion the customer was displaying when they were talking about certain problems. But they're research and you should definitely use them. Okay,
so how much say should they have in the question, designing questions or defining questions?
That's an interesting question. So, some UX researchers have, let's say, a degree in cognitive psychology, right? They might be really good at, if you give a question to them, they might be like, hey, Rashid, this is probably not the right way to ask it because this is leading the customer on. Since I've always as a research, if they really know what they're talking about, you should help them make those decisions. And if you really have a strong pushback, and as Jordan said, if you have facts or data or anything that backs you up that tells you this is not the right way to do things, you as a product manager, I think, has a final say in how you really want to use research, right? But these people sometimes have a lot of experience and have a really good understanding because they've done it for so long, and you should always value their feedback. But as I said, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you, because all this data becomes a fundamental part of defining a roadmap. So you have to make the final decision. You have to really make sure that you understand what the user researchers are doing and what the data they're collecting and how that actually correlates to your product.
Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. So next question goes to Ness.
Hey, so I know I tuned in a little late here, but what are some KPIs or just ways for measuring your performance when doing lean customer development?
That's a good question. So we exactly, this comes back to the statistically, significant number. What Cindy told me was very simple. She said, if you're hearing the same thing from customers, then it's time to stop, right? At some point in your interview process, you'll end up at a spot where you're listening to the exact same thing. And she was of opinion that you never stop until you get to that point. When you heard everything that your customers has to say, at that point, that is like her perspective was, that is a key KPI that you have to track. Another thing that I personally have found, if not KPI, is that sometimes when you do your research, you find the right person. It sometimes ends up being you don't find the right people at all. And that means their answers or their pain points does not correlate to anything what you're trying to do. At that point, it's okay to cut the conversation up, say hi, bye, it's okay, thanks for your time, let's move on. Given the fact that product managers have a lot more things than just user research on their plate, I think from a time perspective, I have always thought about, if it depends on the stage of the problem. If I'm doing a very early design or a new scenario or a completely new trying to break a new market segment, I have personally done anywhere between 60 to 30 customer interviews to get there. But if it was for just a minor feature improvement, I would just rather trust my customer advisory board or one or two customers that I have previously mentioned this issue to me, and I would just circle back with them on a solution hypothesis. But I think the key KPI, because it's so emotional, it's so behavioral driven, I think the key KPI for you to keep in mind is that you stop when you have started hearing the same thing again and again.
Cool. So we don't have any other questions right now. Keep them coming in at theproductmentor.com/live. And with that said, back to you, Harikrishna.
So making them talk, it's really hard. I have felt, I've seen customers who can't shut up. They will just keep going and going, which is good for us. And I've seen customers it's really, really hard to elicit any sort of valuable feedback from them. The best weapon in your armory is a minute of awkward silence. If they're not going to say anything, you don't have to fill in that void. You don't have to say a word. Just stay silent. At some point, it's like who's going to blink first. If you have the discipline, they're going to blink first and they're going to stop talking again. And that's a good way for you not to interject, change the conversation, move to a different level, or try to do anything to it. Let them talk about what their key pain points are. Don't ever ask binary questions. No question should have a yes or no answer. It should always be followed by something like what, when, how, why, right? Even if they say they have an issue, but you really have to understand why do they have the issue. If you had something else, what would you do? Keep digging, because that's when you really understand, again, I come back to the rats and dents analogy, but binary questions never let you understand that difference. But when you try digging more, it'll give you more perspective on what's a rat versus a dent. Moving on. So questions. So some common questions that folks have talked to me about when I've talked about lean customer development is that, how long is a good interview? Some, essentially, if you're a product manager, I do get a lot of vendors trying to sell me stuff, and it always starts off with, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time? And I've realized 15 minutes, nothing ever happens in 15 minutes. By the time you get all the audio, video, everything figured out, it's a good 5 minutes gone, 5 minutes of intro and 5 minutes done. What I've always felt was, they might go against, set theory, but for me, I've felt the sweet spot to be always be 30. And I've felt when you're upfront with your customer that you need 30 minutes, it's a little trust thing, right? You're never going to go overboard. You know your interview script by heart so you can land in 30 minutes. But this 15-minute conversation has always felt not the right amount to me. And I don't believe in 15 minutes you probably end up learning enough to satisfy your curiosity and get enough data for you to make decisions for your product. Another one is compensation. I've seen a lot of customers who are happy to talk to me without any sort of compensation. But I've seen a lot of customers who probably will be like, hey, what's in it for me? Especially when you go through platforms like Validately, you have to pay them to get the right set of customers. One of the key things that I felt about compensating more than money or Starbucks gift cards and things like that, I've always told them if they are an existing user of my product, you have a get out of jail free card. I will help you if you have an issue, whatever it be, wherever it be Microsoft, you just let me know. I'm going to follow up and make sure that your problem is solved. That I felt like really like, the trust level with the customers really went up because I used to follow through. If they have an issue, like I used to work in Visual Studio and Azure, but if they had an issue in Internet Explorer, I would literally go up to Internet Explorer PMs and say, hey, one of the customers has a problem. Can you help them with it and hound them until that problem was done? So I felt something like, especially if you're working in a large organization and there are multiple departments and your customer is an existing, has an existing account or uses your product, a good way of compensation is a getting out of jail free card. The second thing is that a lot of customers don't really get face time with the product people, right? It's really rare sometimes for them to talk to the direct product manager or the head of engineering or yada yada about their problems. So always leave time at the end of the interview for them to ask you questions. Tell them, hey, as a part of the interview, I'll be happy to answer any and all questions I can answer about this product or this space. And you basically share your expertise with them on your product and your domain, and they've always appreciated it. Or phone. If you can, always in person is good. So if I was in Seattle, I was always try getting a coffee with them, a 30-minute coffee. I would buy them a cup of coffee and chit chat. It was also great because that really helped me understand emotions a lot better. Otherwise, phone. Record. Always ask customers whether you can record the conversation. This feels like, most good product managers do, but sometimes you forget. But it's always important if you really, as Jordan said, it's a sales guy or a business guy comes and tells you, like, where is your data? Like, who told you about this? How many customers told you about this? It's always good to have that thing in your kitty where you say, hey, I have 30 customer interviews. Everything is recorded. If you're interested, please go. Here's a link. Go watch it and let me know if you felt that I misunderstood their pain points or things incorrectly. So recording is always good, but always ask the customer. Permission before you do it. And finally, like when to stop. And my perspective on lean customer development has always been you stop when you start hearing the same thing over and over again. Till that, you keep continuing because you probably have not explored the problem area in sufficient depth, and that's why you're hearing new things over and over again. Another thing to note is that if you accidentally pick a problem area or a problem hypothesis sufficiently vast, it gives you a way to pivot. You can basically say, oh, this is too big of a problem hypothesis. I got to break it down. And you might pick one or two sub-problem hypotheses and run with it for the next set of interviews. So you're able to make forward progress on your product planning without having to block on getting 60 interviews or 70 interviews done. So making sense of responses. So, I have, everybody, what I've always followed is that once I get the raw responses from the customers out, I try to build my own Excel sheet, and not everybody has to follow it. And if you do sufficiently low number, you probably have the data in your head. But given that we used to do 60 to 30 plus customer interviews, we used to be very systematic. We used to go over the interview notes. It's always good to have another person take notes. So that is one thing when you have a user researcher, it makes kind of sense, because if she invites you to the meeting, you can take notes and she can focus on questions, because I've always felt it's kind of hard getting all the right info and getting the questions. Otherwise, you have to depend upon the recording, right? And not a lot of us have time to spend half an hour on the interview and then spend half an hour re-listening to the recording so you can actually transcribe what the customer said. So once you have all the data, you basically, for every customer, you put a check mark saying, hey, this guy validates my hypothesis, this does not validate my hypothesis. And a good rule of thumb that we've done is that your hypothesis is probably a solid place for you to start with if, like, if your 80% of your responses actually follow through validation or it invalidates. At that point, you basically pivot and figure out, hey, there's probably not the right set of level, or there's not the right hypothesis go with. It also gives you an opportunity to look at surprises, right? If you see like the customers talking about pain points that are completely different what you expected them to, then you pivot on new hypothesis and follow that line of thought and that line of interviewing with your customers so you get the right information out. Again, it's rats versus dens. It's always important to factor in emotion. When you really hear people use the F word like 10 times, or really feel their frustration when they talk about the scenario, you can always guarantee that it's probably more of a rat than ever is a den. And that gives a higher weightage to what you would assign to that pain point, and that kind of flows automatically up the stack towards top of your priorities. And finally, like when you really understand rats, you have to make sure the product, even if you've built a product, or built a solution for these customers, that their behavior would change. You could build the most fantastic product, and if it's probably has, the first time user experience, or even the ramp up to getting there is slightly higher than you thought it would be, the customer's not going to use the product, then it's complete failure. So it's making sure the customer, the customer population that you're talking to is willing to change the behavior, so that your problem in the solution hypothesis and the product you're building satisfies their pain points is very important to validate as part of the lean customer development. So that's actually all I had. It's a very quick talk. I would highly encourage you to, whenever you get time, read the Lean Customer Development book. It's a little theory oriented, but I have always felt it gives a really good grounded understanding of how you want to think about customer development. It is a good process to keep in your head and has to follow when you think about talking to customers, taking notes, how you follow up, how you actually, condense all into a set of questions and answers that you want to feed back in product planning. It's a good mental model and a framework for you to trust your customer interviews on. And I put a link to the 95 ways to find your customers. It's pretty interesting for people struggling to find the right set of customers to talk to.
Excellent. So definitely I recommend you post those links up to the meetup page so people can actually access them. Again, thank you to our speaker, Hare Krishna Menon, for product manager over at 2 Sigma, for his talk on lean customer development. And as always, the presentation will be posted on our SlideShare channel. And a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, to everyone else who joined us today, and the product mentor. And also don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor, like today's speaker, the product people of all sorts, visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And with all that said, I'll see you guys all very, very, very soon. Thank you. Bye. All right. Wow, we finished early. So Rashid, feel free to just ask your question. We're between talks right now, so you can do that.
So one of the questions that I have is, how can we avoid biases in summarizing and executing on the learnings from customer interviews?
So that's a good question.
Do we end up being biased when we do it?
If you trust data, then no. That's why, when you try to keep your questions simple, non-binary, and to the point, so you will prevent customers from going down the path that you want them to hear. Like once you have transcribed notes, once you have videos, and it's really not unless you lie to yourself and you want to fudge the data, you're never going to present the data in any other way, right? It is actual data you got from customers. But the best way is to prevent that really early in the cycle. That is when you talk to customers itself. is make sure you don't lead them down the path that you want them to go to, because that's not always a guaranteed way for you to build the product that you want, but that's probably not what your customers want.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Ness, we're gonna get going in about 20 minutes. You're good on your side?
Yeah, I think so. Coming through clear?
Yep. Sounds good. Nothing weird. Cool. So again, for those of you joining us, this is how you make the sausage. Thank you guys for joining us. Stick around. Niss's talk is awesome and the prettiest one I've ever seen. So it's definitely, it'll definitely be a great talk. Niss does a lot of these great talks. And he's talk number 4 for today. So definitely stick around for that. He's going to help us learn how to make high quality or high velocity decision making. Cool. So with that said, I'm going to be bouncing around a little bit over here. I need to move my legs before I lose all feeling in them. But those of you who are in the room, feel free to talk amongst yourselves, and I'll be back in just a moment. And I'll see everyone who's joining us very shortly. See you guys in just a moment. Stick around. All alone. All alone. Those of you who are joining us, and it looks like we still have a few, we're going to probably be getting going with the next talk in about 13 minutes or so. If you have any questions, any generic product management questions you'd like to ask while we all kind of wait for the official start time of the next and final talk of the day, feel free to post it to the Slido channel, theproductmentor.com/live, right on the bottom of the page, and I'll do my best to answer it or hand it around the room to see who else in the room might want to answer the question. So definitely feel free there. While that happens, I'm going to see if anything happened in the world the past few hours while we've been doing this. See if product management has changed or if the world still exists. Hey, the world still exists. That's great. So quiet in here. All right, I'm gonna take a step away, folks, for just a few. If I see some questions come in, I will jump back immediately. Until then, see you guys in a bit. But do feel free to post some questions. I'm happy to answer what I can or help where I can while we wait for the official start time of 1 o'clock for the next talk. Hello, everybody.
Howdy.
Yeah, I heard a voice.
You needed a bathroom break. You deserved it.
Let's see here. Bump it up a doo. Ah, that's what I wanted to do. All right, we're gonna get started in about 2 minutes. We didn't have any hiccups with YouTube in the last segment, so hopefully we don't jinx ourselves and we're good for the remainder. Let's see here.
Is there any format in which do you expect us to provide feedback, or is it like based on our understanding, or we can provide it whatever you want?
You can ask questions. You can provide a critique, topical, how they stood, how they did their hair. Well, maybe not their hair. That might be too far. But anyway, critiques can be in any kind of any way you want. Just send it to them via email. I just want to make sure that everyone's definitely watched everything and either had questions about the topic or feedback about the topic or something from everyone in the program.
And is it fine to reach out to individual presenters, like who are not your mentors, to discuss a few topics? Yes.
And I think they expect it.
Okay.
I hope they expect it. Because I just said yes. Haha. Glad I made the decision not to do 10 of these in a row.
It's the first day of the session, right? The first day with talks.
And it's also the new format we're doing where it's tight back to back. It's
every hour.
Yep. It's so weird that I had some free time. It was odd. Oh my God, it's 1 o'clock. You know what that means? It means we're going to get started. And you know what? I've only had 1 Red Bull. So, like this is actual energy, not like fake. Oh, wait, I didn't click enter. There we go. Send. Cool. We're all ready. Everyone's looking all smiley and cheerful. That's really all we care about. Hop over to that. All right. Here we go. It's Sunday, August 13th, 2017, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today, we're joined by one of our mentors, Ness from Content and Product over at Alpha. He's going to be leading a talk on high-velocity decision-making versus high-quality decision-making. It's going to be an amazing talk we've got here today. So just let me briefly explain the format for those of you who might be joining us for the very first time. The people you see along the bottom of your screen are mentors and mentees in the current session of the Product Mentor Program. Product Mentor Program pairs up mentors and mentees for a duration of about 6 months to help up everyone's skills, help mentees kind of take their skills to the next level. They're all in product management. Some are a little bit newer to it than others. But at the end of the day, it's about helping make better product decisions that hopefully result in some better products along the way. We've got people all around the world. Our mentors and mentees are from everywhere. You get paired up one-on-one for that duration of those 6 months. So what we're going to quickly do is some introductions of the people in the room. And then I'll introduce myself and tell you guys a little bit more. And I'm going to start with the person immediately to my left. And that person is Vipul. Say who you are, whether or not you're a mentor or mentee, where you are, and anything else you might want to add about yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vipul Musale. I'm a product manager working for a company called Cornerstone On Demand. We are based out of Santa Monica, California. We are a talent management company, and I'm a mentee.
Outstanding. And over the Shirzad.
Hi everyone, my name is Sherzad. I'm based in Berlin. I work at the company called Here Technologies. We work in the geolocation services and content. So I am also a mentee in this program. Yes.
Rashid.
There's Rashid, and I'm a mentee. I'm based out of Toronto. I work as a product manager for ADP. This particular topic is very close to my heart because I'm living this thing every day. So I'm happy that we are talking about it.
Yep, Ness always does good topics. And we'll go to Ness.
My name is Ness From. I work at Alpha. You'll hear about me a bit more. I'm in New York City, and I'm a mentor.
And John.
Hey everyone, I'm John Kress. I'm a product manager at Barnes & Noble, working on the mobile website, and I'm a mentee in the program based in New York.
Outstanding. And I am Jeremy Horn, aka the product guy, and I will be moderating here today. So as the questions come in at theproductmentor.com/live, along the top of that page, you'll see video. On the bottom, you'll see a place where you can post questions. As the questions come in, as long as they're related to the topic of the day, I'll pass them along to Ness in fairly real time. If the questions are more generic regarding product management or life, I will still ask Ness those questions, but I will save those more generic things until the end today. And also, if anyone is interested in signing up to be a product mentor, we can always use more mentors. We're in over 20 countries around the world. Please do sign up. Go to theproductmentor.com. Read our FAQ. If you're still excited about being a mentor after reading that, definitely sign up. We'd love to talk to you. But with all of that said, let me hand it over to Ness to take it away with today's talk.
Okay, let's see here. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Jeremy, and the Product Mentor Program. I think this is my 4th talk, so it's really exciting to be back. And I'm going to be talking about sharing insights into how to shift from high quality decision-making to high velocity decision-making and what that means. But first, a little bit about me. Co-founded a company called Alpha. We have a platform to drive experimentation, and we work with multinational organizations like Aetna, Prudential, and Pfizer. So we sort of sit at this intersection of companies doing things the same way they've done them for a century and doing things in a nimbler, more customer-centric way. So I'm going to focus a lot on that throughout this talk. We also have some resources that you may be familiar with, and if you're not, I definitely encourage you to check them out. Our podcast is This is Product Management. Jeremy has been on that. It's a great episode. And our Medium publication is Product Management Insider. So if you couldn't guess from the titles, they're pretty relevant to everyone here. So our objective today is to understand the benefits of and install a framework for high velocity decision making. Similar to past talks I've given, the shift isn't binary. It's really a wide spectrum, and you may not be doing any of the stuff I'm going to talk about. You may be doing a lot of it already. The goal isn't to go from 0 to 1. There is no 0 and there's no 1 here. The goal is really to make an improvement along the spectrum. So if you're doing really well, it's to do a little better. And if you're doing not so much, it's to see how much you can take on and do. So to give some background, the topic of high velocity decision making, it's been around for a while, but really heated up in the last few months when Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, in his latest letter to shareholders, he reiterated this theme he's been talking about for 2 decades now. And he has this concept of 2 competing kind of corporate operating systems and decision-making frameworks, which he calls day 1 and day 2. And there's a variety of differences between them. And I've taken some quotes from his letters and his talks over the last 20 years to try to describe this day 1 versus day 2. So he talks about a starter pack for day 1, including session, a skeptical view of proxies, the eager adoption of external trends, and high velocity decision making. And he compares that to day 2, which he says is about high quality decisions. And he says day 2 companies make high quality decisions, but they make high quality decisions slowly. And last, and this is kind of his analysis of day 1 versus day 2. He says, most decisions should probably be made with somewhere around 70% of the information you wish you had. If you wait for 90%, in most cases, you're probably being slow. Plus, either way, you need to be good at quickly recognizing and correcting bad decisions. If you're good at course correcting, being wrong may be less costly than you think, whereas being slow is going to be expensive for sure. So my team actually took more of his quotes and some other strategies implemented by organizations and compiled a list of differences between day 1 and day 2 you can read about here. There are certainly pros and cons to each. For example, in day 1, failures, or this notion of failing fast or failing occurs, and patience is required to realize return on investment in new ideas. Meanwhile, in day 2, companies benefit from some level of predictability, whether it's legitimate predictability or a faux sense of predictability. You can argue about that. They can increase the efficiency of their existing businesses and maximize short-term profits. Bezos acknowledges all of this, but ultimately says that day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating painful decline, followed by death, and that is why it is always day 1 at Amazon. So I think his assessment is a little bit melodramatic, but many of you may be living through some of the pain he's pointing to. I don't know necessarily about excruciating painful decline and death, but perhaps stasis and faltering into irrelevance. And I got these from a few different sources at the bottom, and I'll share all the reading at the end of the slide. Some of the numbers are kind of unbelievable with regard to day 2 processes and slow decision making. I read some numbers. 1/3 of products are delivered late or incomplete due to slow decision making. That speed of decision making is like the #1 bottleneck when it comes to internal communication and problems with regard to that. And that also for every 60 minutes a product team works, they spend 3/4 of that waiting on decisions to be made, or another 3/4 of that waiting on decisions to be made. So it's a lot of thumb twiddling, you would say. And many of you may be familiar with this, recognize this to some extent. And when you compare that to the verdict of day 1 companies, I kind of think this chart says it all. Amazon's complete disregard, and Amazon, not just Amazon, but other companies, Netflix, Uber, complete disregard for the status quo and their willingness to cannibalize their own business has clearly led to enormous growth. I think there's something to day 1 and high velocity decision making, and by now many leading organizations have embraced some variant of it. So now we're going to talk about what that is, what that actual operating system looks like. There's 3 aspects of shifting to high velocity decision making, beginning with your organization, and then your team, and finally you as a product manager. Of course, there's something you can do in each of these, but this is kind of how I break it down. First, organization. Second, with regard to your team. Third is like very independently things that are about you. And I'll go into each in more detail over the next few slides. So let's start with the organization and balancing operating systems. So when it comes to your organization, the first insight is that you don't need to apply the same decision-making speed to everything. A really great description I heard, we did an event on this, and a head of product at a large organization kind of described this as pockets of day 1 within a day 2 infrastructure. So for example, some teams might have permission to experiment, whether they're in an innovation lab or just some digital product teams, whereas others really need to move slowly and have a lot more, maybe bureaucracy. And it turns out that even Amazon, again, there's not a talk about Amazon, they're just, a really good inspiration for this sort of thinking. But even they have day 2 processes when it comes to hiring. Bezos once said that he, quote, rather interview 50 people and not hire anyone than hire the wrong person. And that makes a lot of sense. So to enable good decisions at speed and to enable day 1, sometimes you need to have a day 2 framework. Certain processes don't need to move so quickly. You have to identify in your organization which needs to move quickly and which doesn't. So like which is where the status quo is beneficial and where it's not. And you can't just come in and say it all needs to be torn down and redone and everything needs to be like a startup where we have no existing processes or anything like that. You really need to contextualize where some of this slow-moving bureaucracy is okay and where some of it does need to be addressed. And then when you do need to address it and when you do find an area where you need a day one operating system, I don't necessarily want to encourage everyone here to be a fear monger, but odds are that a simple conversation isn't going to work about how do we shift from day 2 to day 1. So you should, of course, try that and just go based on the merits of day 2 and moving faster and see how that goes. Sometimes the only thing that works in certain companies, especially large companies, especially companies that have been around for a long time, is to really spell out the doom that the status quo is leading to. My advice here is to really know your facts and know your history, both from a macroeconomic perspective and a microeconomic one. So know your industry, know your competitors, know your products, both the ones you're working on and the ones you're not, and know who's eating your lunch. That's really what it comes down to. I think every company, big and small, has someone else eating their lunch or trying to eat their lunch. And this applies, just to the companies in every industry. I've seen that, even startups sometimes move slow in certain areas. Maybe they move fast on the whole, but slow in certain areas. So if someone is bottlenecking decisions that need to move faster, you have to explain to them the cost of doing so. And that's where fear, to some degree, you don't have to get, not necessarily to the point that Bezos got in that earlier quote, but to some degree, you have to explain to them the costs of moving slowly. And it can be extreme. It really can be extreme. I point to the Kodak moment in the slide, of Kodak not recognizing changes, but a lot, the Fortune 500 turns over at a crazy rate nowadays. So I think it's okay to point to that. So moving on from the organization to the team dynamic, and there's a lot here. Concept of a risk matrix. So one of the keys is getting your team to move faster. Have an explicit conversation about the costs and benefits of making a decision now versus spending more time to get more information and make a decision later. So there's two points to a cost benefit analysis, and I think we often focus on one without the other. So the first is, the costs. About the costs of being wrong. Sure, are they great? Are they small? And the costs of being slow. But also focus on the benefits. I think a lot of people kind of undervalue the benefits here, but focus on the benefits of speed and iteration, of your competitors who got to the market first with the wrong product, but iterated multiple times to get to the right product before you shipped your V1. So I think it's really important to articulate the benefits. Another point here is to not just the champions. I think that's kind of intuitive, is to address the champions who are already on your side with moving fast. But you really need to address what I've heard called kind of these back-channeling naysayers. Those people are much more important. Not well aligned with you, who don't necessarily say anything in a meeting, might just be like, yeah, cool, do what you want to do. But then behind the scenes are kind of like screwing up this high velocity decision making. So, figure out what their beef is, what their issue with your processes are, and really address them, not confrontationally, but, try to see, maybe they have legitimate concerns and legitimate interests and objectives, and, maybe something you're doing is infringing on that. So try to figure that out. Don't only address the people who already want to do everything you want to do. And then the second part here is when you have options and you're ready to make a decision, hesitation can be a massive bottleneck as well. So not all decision-making is slowed down by a lack of information. Sometimes it's just paralysis, even once you have all the information. Common for people to treat reversible decisions as irreversible decisions and to hesitate accordingly. Whereas in digital, there are really very few irreversible decisions. When you really internalize that, it can help you to mitigate this paralysis. I got this simple matrix from the head of engineering at Flatiron Health, who published it on First Round Review. Again, all the resources are toward the end of the presentation. And this matrix, every team uses at their organization for a lot of decisions. It gives a lot of examples for where it's used, where they lay out the benefits and costs of each option, option A and option B. You have benefits, costs, and mitigations. And so they spell out the risk, well, they spell out the benefits and costs first, and then they spell out the risks that each will incur and ways you might be able to reverse the decision afterward, ways you might be able to de-risk and mitigate any of the issues from each option. And your team can use this framework to have confidence while making high velocity decisions. So again, there's two pieces here, which is the costs and benefits of moving fast with and without information. And then even once you have options given the information in front of you, eliminating or mitigating the paralysis from treating reversible decisions like they're irreversible. Second part of the team dynamic is hopefully going to be familiar with a lot of you here. This is really one of your most important roles as a product manager, is that you need to synthesize and communicate the company's vision to your team. And doing so removes a lot of the uncertainty associated with certain decisions. So, here in the Product Mentor, and at hopefully a lot of your organizations, my organization, we use OKRs and objective-driven management, which are just major breakthroughs. Whereas opposed to if you give someone a task without context, it's like giving your engineering team a spec without explaining the problem you're solving. They're often left guessing and making a lot of assumptions. If they do the task, they'll probably do it wrong. But more likely than not, they'll hesitate throughout the entire process, wondering what the objective is because your spec or task is incomplete or ambiguous. Whereas if you offer a shared vision to your team, it gives them so that many of their assumptions are dispelled and they have criteria for tasks and tactics that kind of cascade from that vision. So, your C-suite might set an objective for the quarter or for the year, and that cascades down to a department that are aligned with the C-suite, and then it cascades down to your team. And instead of just giving everyone tasks, explain what the organization's objectives are, the department's objectives, your team's objectives, and this speeds up and increases the quality of decision-making thereafter. And now moving on to the third section, we talked about organization, we just talked about team, and now we're going to talk about you as a product manager, what you can do. So, and how you can independently drive higher velocity decision making. So earlier when I referred to Bezos' quote, it's easy to interpret him as though high velocity decisions are the same as low quality decisions made without adequate information. And while there is a trade-off, it's not true that velocity means low quality decisions mean high quality. It's definitely not true. There are things you can do to still de-risk and inform quick decisions. So we recently surveyed 140 product managers about a variety of activities, including road mapping, reporting, collaboration, and experimentation. And one data point to me was this huge increase of the number of product managers who do ad hoc rather than recurring experiments, the larger the organization is. So you can see it's around like 30% of smaller organizations are doing ad hoc experiments, whereas when you get to these larger multinational organizations, it's about 50%, more than 1 in 2 product managers do ad hoc. And at first you're like, well, what's the issue with doing ad hoc experiments? And the problem is, I think that it's really reactive. And if you only generate data when it's time to make a decision, you're like by definition bottlenecking that decision. You need to be continuously generating data in parallel and in anticipation of decisions coming up down the road. I'm not saying just to do research in any direction, boil the ocean, but anticipate some of the decisions you're going to have to make down the line. Because discovery and customer development aren't phases at the beginning of a project. I'm sure many of the talks today, or many of the points from the talks today, and many of the talks that Product Mentor I know historically talk a lot about how discovery and customer development aren't phases at the beginning of a project. You don't make all the decisions at the beginning of a project. As a product manager, you probably make dozens of decisions a day, and you can't wait to start generating data the moment you need to make a decision. You need to have data already. So part of high velocity decision making means making fresh and robust data available continuously. And that's your job as a product manager, to have that information available to your team, qualitative, quantitative. Be interviewing customers and be bringing customers into the office on a recurring schedule when you think you're going to need them at a point of making a decision, but have that always available. And then the last piece of advice about you and about this manual is really about your mental state. And this really could apply to most manuals. Be prepared for the long haul. Change, especially in large organizations, is really, really hard and can take a very long time. And even when change is occurring, it can be tough to notice while you're in the trenches. I thought about making the slide actually one of the first points in the manual because I think it's that important, but that would have, of course, messed up my framework. So nevertheless, it's really important that don't burn yourself out, because if you do, the rest doesn't matter. So treat this like a marathon, not a sprint, and maintain energy and pace yourself throughout the process. So to wrap it up, let's just talk about a few areas you can apply high velocity decision making. Going back to the initial step of the manual, where are these pockets or opportunities for pockets of day one? Find reversible, low risk, high impact areas to make decisions quickly with data or can already make available. So maybe it's about selecting which API to use and not going through a full RFP or analysis if it's a non-critical part of your product. Perhaps it's about assigning responsibilities within your team or increasing your release frequency. If you're exploring new product concept, a mock sales deck of it quickly before investing in engineering. There are a number of areas where moving fast and iterating is more important than moving slow and making the so-called best decision, which in reality, like we've talked about, probably isn't even the best decision. And then, as promised throughout the presentation, here's some resources I've referred to throughout this talk with even more insights about high-velocity decision-making. So the first one on our blog, you just Google Alpha, how do product teams embrace high-velocity decision-makings, Harvard Business Review, how companies can learn to make faster decisions, and first round review, an interview with the head of engineering at Flatiron Health about his matrix to help growing teams make great decisions. Finally, I turn this over to you. Try to think of just a few areas where your organization, your team, or you personally are bottlenecked, taking way too long to make decisions that are reversible, that need to be made, and that are slowing down progress. So what can you do? What can you do to drive change and speed up decision making? Thanks.
Cool. Just had a question come in from Rashid. Take it away.
So, hi. My question is, when you talk about decision making, most of the time there are multiple stakeholders involved in the process of decision making. So, is it fine to consider give and take in the decision making process? And if yes, where should we draw the line? And it'd be great if you can share some examples where we should be willing to do give and take, where we should not negotiate.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't necessarily think that's much of a choice. I think give and take is, your only choice in product management. So there's actually an article I can share after this around negotiation for product managers. Really good article from the head of product at Exo Group. Did just like a full analysis of how to be better at negotiating. So I think the first thing is really the empathy part, and I talked about that, where it's understand where other stakeholders are coming from. Like, why do they want things to be slow? What are they scared of? Figure out what they're scared of, and often if you can talk to them about what you're scared of as well, and try to get them, like, have the empathy to get them to have empathy for you, kind of, you may find that you're not that far apart. Because hopefully everyone wants the company to do well, and that you're kind of all in this together, you're all in the same boat. And if you're sinking, they're sinking too. And if they're sinking, you're probably sinking too. So that's kind of powerful. Of course, you're always going to have stakeholders that just refuse, right? And they want things to be the way they are. And then sometimes, there's a couple different things you can do. I talk to product managers who experiment secretly, right? And they do things on their own, and they just decided, I'll ask for forgiveness instead of permission. And for the most part, it works out. For the most part, they do it. If it was bad, they reversed the decision before everyone finds out about it. And they'll get to a quick decision, whereas other people, or they'll get to a good decision, they'll get to a good outcome before other people in the company even realize that they've tried something. And now they have data. And that once you have data, and once you have those few wins, and I talk about this in almost all my talks, like broadcast those wins, like make a meal out of it. When you do something a new way properly, like socialize it, throw a party, get everyone to realize, like, whoa, the whole world didn't come crashing
Cool. So we got some more questions. John Francis seems to have asked a few, so I'll take them one at a time. How do you help change the culture of an organization to be more day one if you do not have the political power necessary to do so? Ness, are you there?
I think his Hangout is stuck.
I think he froze. That was such a good question. That Ness is frozen. Let's just give him a moment to come back. I'll let him know. Feel free to sing a song, anyone.
So Ness mentioned an article, Jeremy. So like, how can we access that article? Would you be uploading it on the meetup or?
Which one?
So he mentioned that after this presentation, he will share an article on how to get better at negotiating.
You mean the article that Ness mentioned?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, as soon as he comes back, we'll ask him that question.
Okay.
Yeah, I just posted the link to the group chat. I think it's that article. That's the head of the product at that company he mentioned.
Yeah, we'll figure out about how Ness is going to make it available to the wider audience. All right. Just waiting for Ness. He's working on getting back. And if you do take me up on the offer of singing a song, make sure we have the rights. I don't want any more takedowns. It's funny, even after you purchase the music from a place like Shutterstock or something, every time I post a video with the music that I bought the license to, I get an automated takedown of that video that I then have to go and fight automatically for every one of them. Thank you for that, YouTube. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
What are your thoughts on copyright, especially like knowledge copyright or publications copyright or even music copyright?
I'm all for protecting people's rights and property and content and all that, but when you start automating it, where I literally type every time I post a video and I say I purchased the license to this music, every time, at some point, it's putting a little bit more of a burden on me, and it shouldn't be this automated nagging device. But anyway, that's about me. I think we've got Ness back. Are you back?
I'm on my phone internet here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So we had a question. I don't think we got to the answer of it. Question from John Francis asking, how do you help change the culture of an org to be more day one if you do not have the political power necessarily to do so?
Yeah, definitely there's a lot implied in my talk today that if you just got hired tomorrow, like today, your first order of business is probably not to change your whole company and get them to make decisions faster. Like, some of this does assume that you've been a product manager before, that you have some sway in the organization. Maybe you already have some wins under your belt, some influence. I think if that's the case, if that's kind of where you are, then maybe just focus on yourself and focus on the 2 points I talked about for yourself, not quite shifting the organization. Listen intently to some of the other talks today and throughout the session, and then maybe come back to this in a few months. So definitely this is not a day one thing. So it's, you're not going to change your Fortune 100 healthcare company tomorrow if you're right out of college.
Next question also from John Francis. How do you hold people accountable to high velocity decision making?
Yeah, I think OKRs are a really good way of doing that. I think that's why, Jeremy implemented them in the product group. And I think people forget also what working was like. Not necessarily before. Objective-oriented management has been around for a while, but in organizations where things are really micromanaged and you're given tasks and you don't know why you're doing them. If anyone was an engineer before, has worked with engineers in an environment where if you ask them what they're building, they would have no idea, and they're just building a spec, and they'll do things, make mistakes, where if they had any idea what the problem and solution you were focusing on, they wouldn't do that. But you just play broken telephone in the organization. Nobody really knows why or what the vision is or what they're doing. I think accountability is much easier in an objective-oriented environment where you have objectives and key results. So you hold people accountable to their key results. They agree to them, right? You didn't assign them. They picked them given the objectives that you had. Now, if they disagree with the objectives, you've got other issues. But at least in that context, that's an issue far down the funnel that you can deal with. But it's much easier to hold people accountable when they know why, what, and how, and they're responsible for setting their own key results.
Cool. Next question, I'm going to hand over to John to ask.
Hey, great talk so far. I've really enjoyed it. 2 questions for you. First, do you ever use a project's level of effort as an indicator of whether you should make a high velocity decision versus, let's say, a high quality decision? I imagine some of my colleagues asking me, well, if this is a 6-month lift for a project, I'm not sure if we should be making this decision so quickly. And also, do you have a personal example of a high velocity decision that you've made? I'm not talking about like where you got pizza from, but I'm talking about in your work life.
Yeah, so for the first question there on, if it's the effort of a project, I would say you've got to reframe the question there. There aren't too many projects you should have that are 6 months. Obviously, they exist, and I know you were just making up a number. But the point there being that if you start by breaking projects down into simpler parts, you'll find that very few things really have a 6-month, like, we need to do it for 6 months before we know this is the right decision or not. Like, very, very often, you can find out within a few days, hey, we might need to iterate, or hey, we might need to stop this. Yeah, if you have to buy a Super Bowl commercial, I don't know if you can make a high velocity decision there. But potentially you could buy other ads to the same market and see how those do iteratively to see if you should buy a Super Bowl ad. So there are a lot of ways to reframe it and think about, how we can break this project down and make higher velocity decisions around that. There are, of course, certain things that are 6 months decisions. I know in a lot of heavily regulated environments, like if you have to go through FDA approval for a drug, I don't know if you can really like shorten that to any degree. But I find that most often people are not talking about those cases when they're talking about high velocity decisions. In terms of in my own career, probably all the time, one of the, let me think of a good example for now. I mean, let me just pull up something we're working on and see. Let's see. A lot of what we do is, I gave that example where, so we're a small organization, we're 25 people. So a lot of what we do is just pretend as if things are real before they're real and get feedback that way. So for example, a talk like this, if we're trying to figure out a topic for a conference talk, we'll just pitch 20 different ideas to 20 different conferences and have no material ready to go, like whatsoever. We'll just pitch topic ideas and see if any conference is like, hey, that sounds really interesting. This high velocity decision making, like I've pitched it a bunch of times and people now think it's interesting. So I had to put together a deck. Like I didn't create a whole PowerPoint and then pitch it. I had a few different ideas, pitched it, and then did it that way. In terms of product management, areas you could do that is we'll often put features on our website that don't yet exist. So that's, I don't want to say that's the norm, but we'll put things on our website that we straight up do not have. And if a salesperson comes to me and says like, hey Ness, where did this come from? I was on a phone with someone and they said they really wanted to see that feature. I was like, okay, good to know, write it down. And you know, not everyone's thrilled about that all the time, but that's a really good way to make a quick decision, de-risk decisions of building things.
Awesome, thanks.
And we'll put almost no thought into whether or not to do that. That was kind of the main point there. Like, I'll just do it.
Yep. Next question from an anonymous individual. How can you affect scenarios where stakeholders are more brand-centric than consumer-centric, leading to decisions that may be more black hat than white?
Okay, there's a lot there, but kind of going back to the fear thing, like, you can be really brand-centric. I'm sure the people at Kodak were really brand-centric too. And where did that get them? So fear works in large organizations. And sometimes it's the only thing that works. So, you know, don't be afraid to keep, you know, beating a dead horse with it. And going back to the numbers, like, our competitors are doing this. One of our biggest customers just switched. Like, to what end are we going to be brand centric, or whatever the term, you know, that people who don't want to change the status quo, like, to what end? Sometimes you can just ask them, like, at what point will you say that this isn't working? Like, give me a number. 10%, we lose 10% of our customers, revenue goes down a certain number, we can't hire anyone anymore. That's usually like one of the early indicators, is that people don't want to join your ship anymore. So to what end are you going to keep doing things the way they're doing? And then it's in parallel, start doing things a different way, maybe in secret, and seeing if that works. One of the best pieces of advice, of course, I heard was from someone running a design agencies or customer insights agency. He said, at some point, you may have to realize that the best piece of advice is to quit. So don't be afraid. Like, if your company like refuses to change, it may just not be the right company. And you can't force a company to change, but you can scare them into changing. You can show them the better way of doing things. You can have that data. And if they still refuse, then it's not the right place.
Yep. And that last question did come to us from Ruben McCoy. Next question, it goes to Vipul, and I'm going to hand it over to him.
Yeah. So, hey, John. So my question was basically, when it comes to sunsetting a product that your company might have invested millions of dollars, resources, time in building, how do you apply the high velocity decision frame approach, or can you even do that? Or is it this approach is only focused towards building new products?
No, I definitely love that question. Sunsetting a product is similar to a concept. So one of the questions I ask a lot of product managers is like, if I looked at your roadmap right now, what level of confidence do you have that everything on it is really a good idea? I say, oh, you know, I'm pretty confident. We go through it. Like, you're sure that's a good idea? I said, well, maybe not. And so treat, you know, economists are quick to say like, oh, the sunk cost doesn't matter. In reality, it always seems to matter. So, you know, like telling your marketing team that invested ad money, and telling your sales people that are all trained on it, and telling all these people that, well, it's a sunk cost, let's get rid of it. That's not really a great strategy. I find that that's rarely effective. But what is effective is treating existing projects and underperforming projects as resources that could go to something good. So it's not like, oh, we're just going to kill this and you're not going to have anything to do. It's like, here's what we could be doing. So you have to have an alternative. And that's the whole thing about high velocity decision making. It's not just the costs, it's the benefits. So what are you going to do with that money? Because in a lot of organizations, like, you know, there's that kind of joke, if you don't use your budget, you lose it. So that's not good, right? You don't want to lose your budget. So what could it go to? What could you be doing? And maybe you don't want to use the word, we're going to kill this product. Maybe you want to use the word, we're going to reinvest resources, or we're going to refocus, or something like that. So some of it's terminology, and some of it's just having something better, because just killing products, that's not fun. Nobody wants to do that. Even though as a product manager, most of your job is saying no and killing bad ideas. But if that's all you do, no one's going to want to work with you. You have to have, you know, a vision, something better, like the Holy Land you're bringing everyone to. And you can't spend time doing everything. You can't do underperforming products and good products. You got to do one. So it's really about shifting.
Awesome. Awesome. And so thank you to our speaker, Ness from Alpha, for today's topic, for today's discussion on a high velocity decision making versus high quality decision making. A lot of really great, great topic, great ideas, and also a lot of great questions and answers there at the end too. And as always, the presentation is going to get posted over to our SlideShare channel shortly. And also a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, and everyone else who joined us today, and the product mentor. And also don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor, like today's speaker, Ness, to product people of all sorts, visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And with all that said, thank you guys for joining us today, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.
Thanks, Jeremy. Bye.
Bye. Have a great weekend, guys.